Welcome once again to a journey into the quiet rhythms of history. Tonight, we will not charge into battle, nor will we raise our voices. We will walk slowly, gently, through the wooded paths and rice paddies of Edo period Japan. This is not the Japan of sword fights and shouts, but of silence, duty, and careful rituals. Let the noise of the modern world soften. Let the tension in your shoulders ease. Close your eyes if you wish, and let us begin our descent into a world of folded paper, damp earth, lacquered wood, and quiet expectation. We start in a village, one not known for heroes or epic duels, but for dust, fatigue, and the quiet weight of a name that once carried power. The hero of our story today was a samurai. That's his portrait. He's pretty damn cool looking, right? Okay, let me rephrase that. His ancestors were samurai. By the time we meet him, he's just a desk-bound bureaucrat living in a small town. What happened? How did the world change? Well, that's the backstory I'm trying to nail down for my samurai fantasy novel, which is going well. It's been a rough couple of months. My father passed away unexpectedly. Then my house flooded. Then I got COVID. So writing has been sporadic at best, but I'm back now and trying to get into the groove of things. It's tough for me to move from writing epic fantasy battles to writing a calm story about a peaceful time period. So I've been doing some research to help make the transition easier. What I've discovered is that I knew virtually nothing about the Edo period of Japanese history, aka the Tokugawa shogunate, which lasted from 1603 to 1867. All I really knew was that it was a time of peace, isolationism, and the rise of the mighty ninja who assassinated enemy shoguns and whatnot. There's the second part of the story, but today we're talking about the samurai. If you follow this channel, you already know that I love these guys. Back in episode 240, we talked about the Hyugan Musu, the special elite force of the shogun's army. These guys were badasses. They were the shock troops that conquered much of Japan for the Tokugawa clan. They wore early modern armor with big helmets and huge swords. I mean, talk about an intimidating force. But their tactics were also influenced by Korean and Chinese armies, incorporating bows and firearms. We discussed them because they show up in the earliest manga I ever read. They were the Samurai 7 inspired the original Lone Wolf and Cub series by Kazuo Kojima. They were also the subject of my first ever cosplay. But yes, I went all out. I think I was drawn to the hybrid nature of the Hyugan Musu. At the time, I loved Western comics and anime, so anything that mixed two cultures together was right up my alley. Looking back, I cringe at the quality of the costume. I'll spare you the photo, but at the time I thought I looked pretty cool. Maybe I still do. Anyway, after the Battle of Sekigahara in 1600, the last major battle of the Sengoku period, the Hyugan Musu wasn't needed anymore. Their role was to conquer territory and enforce the authority of the new government. Once that was done, they were demobilized and returned to their provincial domains. And that's when our story picks up. So here's the situation. For nearly 200 years, Japan is at peace. There's no fighting, so there's no need for elite military forces. The clans that once fielded armies now just keep records and collect taxes. The daimyo, or lords, rule their domains like kings. The emperor is a figurehead. The shogun holds all the power, but he's too busy having harems of women to pay attention to the provinces. So local administrators rule with very little oversight. The daimyos raise their own samurai retainers and train peasant levies in case of emergency, but they don't really expect war to break out, and that's why our samurai exists. He needs to keep records, collect taxes, judge civil cases, deliver messages, train local levies, advise the daimyo, manage finances, inspect weapons, prepare reports, maintain order, defend villages, check for bandits, plan for natural disasters. Advise the shogun plan for foreign affairs, draft new laws, and fight wild boars. This is not an easy job. Our samurai works long hours, 12 or more hours a day. He does it because he feels honor-bound to serve his master. He does it because that's his duty. Yes. He does it because he is a samurai. The challenge I face as a writer is showing the contrast between the old values and the new realities. Yes, our samurai practices kendo. He takes great pride in his katana and wakizashi. He knows that they could cut a man in half if he needed. He can ride a horse and shoot a bow and throw a spear. He wears his armor to important events. It's heavy and uncomfortable, but he endures because it's expected of him. He's proud of his craft, and he's proud of his history. But his life revolves around paperwork. The shogun issues edicts, and the daimyo pass them along to the local governors. They in turn issue edicts to the peasants. It all has to be written down and recorded. In ancient China, Confucius said that governing a state is like herding cattle. You use a long stick, and I think something similar is true of record keeping. You must guide it with a firm hand. When the weather turns, you need to inspect storehouses for grain. When flooding occurs, you need to assess damage and allocate funds. When a new tax comes due, you must calculate its impact on each farmer and merchant. And all of this must be recorded on paper and filed for the next official to review. It's not the most glamorous work, but someone's got to do it. During the Sengoku period, samurai constantly went to war. They led armies, commanded men, strategized about terrain. They even had to negotiate treaties. Most of those skills don't translate into peacetime. Few remain useful, but many go to waste. Sure, a samurai may need to lead peasants against bandits or wild boars, but that's not the same thing as commanding 3,000 soldiers into battle. Out. Today, we have college degrees and vocational certifications. In early modern Japan, you either studied Confucianism, Buddhism, Shintoism, poetry, or the martial arts. The samurai who wants to advance in his career will study calligraphy, history, accounting, and law. He'll need to read and write poetry, compose haiku, practice flower arrangement, bonsai, and tea ceremony. None of this will help him on the battlefield, but it will make him more useful in a court of law or in front of a visiting dignitary. Again, none of this is very exciting. It's a far cry from the epic tales of the Sengoku period. I'm writing this story for myself as much as for my readers. Like my samurai protagonist, I'm facing a world that's completely different from the one I grew up in. I remember playing Nintendo and Sega Genesis as a kid. Now my idea of fun is watching Netflix and eating takeout. It's video games and junk food. That's progress. The world keeps changing. Who knows what the future will bring? We're now dealing with artificial intelligence and virtual reality. Who knows where it will be in 20 years or 50 years? All of this makes me a bit nostalgic for simpler times. Maybe that's what makes samurai stories so appealing to me. Maybe I'm trying to recapture the feeling of reading Lone Wolf and Cub as a kid. It's not a conscious decision. I just let the nostalgia flow through me. One final note, one of the reasons I wanted to write about the Edo period is that I want to explore Japanese culture and history. I hope to visit Japan someday, and I want to feel prepared. I'm also fascinated by the similarities between early modern Japan and early modern Europe. The rise of nation-states, the growth of cities, the emergence of bureaucracies, the increased role of paper and ink. These are universal human experiences, and I'm interested in seeing how different cultures dealt with them. In my research, I came across a lot of cultural touchstones that I recognized, like ukiyo-e woodblock prints, for example. They remind me a lot of the posters and album covers from my favorite rock bands. There's also kabuki theater, which looks a lot like Shakespearean theater, haiku poetry, which reminds me of tanka. The more I learn, the more connections I see. I'm hoping that my readers will see these connections as well and learn something new. I'm excited about the journey ahead, both in my research and in my writing. I know that I have a lot to learn, but I'm up for the challenge. After all, I am a samurai. Okay, everybody, that's all I've got for this episode. Thank you so much for listening, and a huge thank you to our supporters. Couldn't do any of this without your support. Please stay safe out there and stay tuned for more stories about samurai. In the world of samurai, there's a term that strikes fear into the heart. It is called the Way of the Ronin. This is the story of those men. We've spoken often about Bushido, the way of the samurai, courage, benevolence, righteousness, sincerity, honor, loyalty, self-control, and even death. These are its tenets. In modern times, we often speak of toxic masculinity. But it's important to remember that toxic traits are not exclusive to one gender. Cowardice, deception, arrogance, spite, greed, and lust. These two can be found in any heart. However, there is another word whose meaning is unique to one culture, one philosophy, one way of life. That word is shinobi. It comes from Japan. It means to endure silently, to bear hardships without complaint. Shinobi describes the ability to persevere through the worst adversities with dignity. And today, we will see what it means to live by the way of the Ronin. The year is 1701. Lord Asano of Akko has been provoked beyond measure. He has been humiliated in the shogun's palace. No one knows how far his anger can go. But when he reaches for his sword, everyone knows his limits have been crossed. The rules of the shogun's palace were absolute. Drawing steel meant only one thing, a fight to the death. Other nobles might plead or negotiate. Asano was beyond such things. The court official responsible, a man named Kira, watched in amusement as Asano approached. Even other courtiers urged him to resist, but he showed no fear. Soon his sword was flashing, cutting down guards and nobles alike. When the dust cleared, 300 men lay dead. Kira had survived, though he was badly wounded. Asano stood over him. "For this insult," he said, drawing his dagger, "I will cut your head off." Kira begged for mercy, offering submission, but Asano did not listen. Instead, he dragged Kira away. Outside the palace, they argued again. And when Kira reached for his own blade, Asano cut off his head. Everyone gasped. It was a bold move, but in the eyes of the law, unforgivable. Shogun Tokugawa Yoshimune knew he had to make an example of the rogue samurai. For Asano, there was no punishment too harsh. Seppuku, the ritual suicide of the samurai, was ordered. And so began the fall of the house of Asano. His possessions were confiscated and divided among loyalist lords. His wife and children were given noble titles, but forbidden to ever speak of their father again. And his 47 retainers, the samurai who had sworn to protect him, they were left masterless. Ronin, they could find new service elsewhere. Many did, but for the moment, they had nothing but the clothes on their backs. In feudal Japan, a samurai's worth was tied directly to his lord. Without Asano, they were disgraced, cast out, their futures dark and uncertain. It would have been easy for them to slink away, to plot vengeance in secret, yet they did not. There are many lessons here, many paths to wisdom. But the first is patience. Honor is a strong current, but it can pull you under if you let it. The quickest path to revenge would also be the path of ruin. They needed a better way. What followed was a long and careful watch. Over the next 14 months, the Ronin studied Kira's household, counting the guards, observing the patrols, memorizing the key entrances. They watched for weakness, for an advantage, for a single chance at justice. Eventually, they had all the answers they needed. In the meantime, the Ronin dispersed. They scattered to the winds, each taking a different path. Rumors spread. Some said they had fled to the mountains, others that they had turned to banditry, and still others that they planned to storm Edo Castle itself. In reality, they were biding their time. Most stayed within the city, living quiet lives, some working as laborers, others taking odd jobs. No one suspected the quiet, unassuming men of plotting revenge. There was one exception. Oishi Kuranasuke, the chief retainer of Lord Asano, kept a low profile. That is, until he began visiting taverns and inns. But instead of carousing with the commoners, he would sit alone, sipping sake. Sometimes he talked to himself. Sometimes he laughed loudly at imagined friends. And sometimes he wept. Everyone assumed he had lost his mind. In truth, Oishi was method acting. He wanted people to think he was mad. But as the days turned into months, and still no attack came, the townspeople's curiosity waned. People forget quickly. By the time the Ronin struck, most had already moved on to the next bit of gossip. On the night of the coup, only 5 men entered Kira's mansion. They did not ride in on horseback like bandits, or storm the gates with banners held high like rebels. They simply walked. They slipped through the shadows, moving with the practiced grace of men who have trained for years. The mission was dangerous and complex. Each man had a vital role to play. They had only one chance to succeed, and they did succeed. It took less than half an hour. Kira never even saw his attackers. His head rolled onto the floor with barely a sound. The men found him sleeping peacefully in his bedroom. They had taken care to ensure that the rest of the household slept undisturbed. Servants were unharmed, family members locked in another part of the mansion. It was a cold winter's night, but inside the house, Kira died warm in bed, unaware that the ghosts of his past had come to collect their revenge. When the men left the estate, they carried Kira's head with them. They traveled light, only 2 boats and 3 carts, one of which was carrying a coffin. It was a small funeral procession, but the gravity of the situation was not lost on the men. What they were doing was illegal, dangerous, and unprecedented. At least 2 of the men knew this was probably their last night alive. They arrived at the grave of their lord before sunrise, placed the head in the coffin, and buried both together in the grave. Then they surrendered to the nearest magistrate. They had brought the head of a high government official to the grave of a disgraced nobleman. Treason and murder most foul. They were ready to die. They rode to Edo in relative comfort, treated like criminals, yet with respect. They arrived at the shogun's court and bowed before the tribunal. They had done their duty. Now they faced their punishment. In the weeks that followed, the Ronin made a tour of the courts. Each man was given the opportunity to speak in his defense. Some tried to flee. They fought their jailers. They attempted escape. They bargained for lighter sentences. Most accepted their fate with quiet dignity. Again, there are many paths to wisdom, but one is to never shy away from the consequences of your actions. Finally, it was Oishi's turn. He bowed before the tribunal. "My lord," he said, "when Lord Asano was ordered to commit seppuku, there was no one to bury him. So we buried him ourselves. Afterwards, we learned that Kira had escaped punishment, so we brought him to justice. If we are judged harshly for these deeds, Oishi will gladly accept it, but please spare the other men. They have families to support." The tribunal was unmoved. All the men were ordered to commit seppuku. Today, the site where the Ronin buried Lord Asano is marked by a simple stone monument. In the old cemetery of the temple, visitors can see their graves side by side. They died as they lived in silence. In the centuries since, the story of the 47 Ronin has become legendary. There are dozens of books and hundreds of films based on their exploits. They have become a symbol of honor, courage, loyalty, and sacrifice. But perhaps the greatest lesson of the 47 Ronin is the importance of patience. Sometimes revenge is a dish best served cold. Edo, Tokyo, the ancient capital city now swallowed by the sprawl of modern Tokyo. The ancient city, a few remaining buildings, mostly temples and shrines and gardens, their aged timber whispering stories of bygone eras. The sprawling remains of Edo Castle, now housing the Tokyo Imperial Palace, and open only for select viewings. And then there's all the rest. The memories tucked away beneath centuries of development, beneath apartment complexes, shops, and railway lines. But even here, Tokyo's history isn't lost. It's still there, waiting to be rediscovered. Now we're going to travel back in time and experience what it would have been like to walk the streets of Edo, Tokyo along the way. We'll discover how archaeologists are unearthing these hidden pieces of the past, what they tell us about life in Edo, and how they keep the spirit of Tokyo's history alive today. Let us now descend into the earth. Beneath the neon and the concrete of modern Tokyo, hidden under subway lines and shopping centers, lie echoes of the old city. Edo. Here, where the soil is thick with ash and rubble from centuries past, archaeologists painstakingly sift through the remnants of time. With each layer they uncover, they draw closer to understanding life in early Tokyo. During the Edo period, the city grew rapidly, becoming the center of Japanese culture, politics, and trade. The ruling Tokugawa shoguns transformed Edo into a bustling metropolis, attracting merchants, artisans, and laborers from across the country. In this urban sprawl, temples and shrines dotted the landscape, offering havens of tranquility amidst the city's clamor. These sacred spaces were not just places of reflection and ritual, but also served as vital community hubs and resting places for weary travelers. Their wood was carved with care, their stones worn smooth by sandal and prayer. But cities shift, fires consumed some, earthquakes shook others, and many, as Tokyo modernized, were simply buried, covered, forgotten. It was 1938 when the Tokyo metropolitan government began excavating the Kudanshita site in the Kyoto ward. At the time, the area was slated for redevelopment, and the dig was intended to be a simple formality, an archaeological check-in before construction commenced. What they found instead was a treasure trove of history, specifically an entire Edo period city block. This accidental discovery led to one of the most extensive archaeological projects in Japan, shedding light on daily life in Edo like never before. What secrets did this subterranean city hold? How did it reshape our understanding of Edo? Join us as we delve into the archives to bring you an exclusive look at this remarkable find. Over the years, archaeologists returned to the Kanda shrine site. In the late 1960s and early 70s, more excavations revealed the outlines of two large buildings, possibly residences of wealthy merchants or even government officials. The scale of these structures hinted at the opulence of their former inhabitants. Intricate details such as pillar holes and the layout of tatami mats provided clues to their social standing in daily life during the Edo era. In 2002, another project uncovered more temple remains nearby, including a 5-story pagoda, a gate, and the foundations of a lecture hall. All of this beneath the hustle and bustle of Tokyo's vibrant Ginza district. Today, Tokyo's rapid modernization seems almost relentless. Skyscrapers pierce the clouds while centuries-old shrines stand surprisingly grounded in their midst. The contrast is stark yet strangely harmonious, much like the city's layered history itself. Archaeologists unearthed over 12,000 artifacts across various sites, each telling a piece of the city's story. Simple things like dishes and combs alongside more complex items like Buddhist statues and architectural fragments. Pottery was particularly revealing, with some types indicating the owners were likely engaged in local rice or soybean trades. Highlighting the economic diversity of Edo, there were also clues to everyday life. Merchants' discarded pipe tells of tobacco habits, while a child's toy suggests simpler pastimes. What surprised the experts was the abundance of Chinese and Korean goods. Showcasing the extensive trade networks of Edo, the presence of foreign items points towards a cosmopolitan city, far from the isolated image often portrayed. This blend of mundane and exotic gives us a rich, multi-layered picture of Edo life. But the biggest surprise came from the excavation at Kanda Myojin Shrine. Beneath the temple grounds, archaeologists discovered a series of tombs, including one possibly belonging to a senior priest. Among the grave goods were items rarely seen in such burials, like luxurious garments and even Western books. This suggested a level of wealth and cultural exchange rarely witnessed in the common graves of Edo. These findings challenged existing narratives about Edo society, showing a more interconnected and nuanced picture than previously imagined. The tombs spoke of a hierarchical society, but also one open to external influences. As researchers continue to analyze these relics, they're not just uncovering material culture, they're piecing together the lives of individuals who once called Edo home. Through chipped cups, worn combs, and weathered scrolls, they're breathing life into a bygone era. Each artifact whispering a story that once played out on the bustling streets and serene temple grounds of this ancient capital. The excavation sites aren't just places of discovery, they've become repositories of collective memory. Local communities have rallied to preserve these sites, transforming them into living museums. Exhibits have been set up to share artifacts and insights, fostering a sense of shared heritage among locals and tourists alike. In the quiet halls of museums, artifacts from the Edo period come to life. Soft lighting bathes each item in an ethereal glow, drawing visitors into a world long gone. Glass cases stand like silent sentinels, guarding treasures from a bygone era. While the past can seem distant, almost unreal, here it's tangible, almost touchable. It's not just history in books or pictures. It's history you can almost feel in your fingertips. The reverence with which each object is displayed underscores its importance, not just as an artifact, but as a fragment of a soul, a story frozen in time. Each turn reveals something new, a ceramic shard whispering tales of craftsmanship, a weathered scroll hinting at forgotten poetry. The hushed atmosphere allows visitors to reflect, to connect the dots of history in their own way. It's a space for contemplation, for dialogue between the present and the echoes of the past. Here, amidst the relics of a bygone era, there's a profound sense of continuity. Visitors don't just observe, they engage. Some ponder the purpose of a simple comb or the artistry of a hand-painted plate. Others might trace the strokes of a calligraphic brush on an ancient scroll. It's an interactive experience, a conversation across the ages. But perhaps the most striking aspect of these museum exhibits is the emotional resonance they evoke. The personal stories embedded in each item, the lives they touch, the memories they carry, all this resonates deeply with visitors. Oh, it's a reminder that history is not just a sequence of events, it's the sum total of countless individual experiences. As we step out of the museums and back into the bustling streets of modern Tokyo, we carry a piece of the past with us. The lessons, the art, the stories, they all become part of our own narratives. The spirit of Edo lives on, not just in historical accounts or museum displays, but in the hearts and minds of those who seek to understand and appreciate its enduring legacy. Today, in the heart of Tokyo, a peaceful shrine stands as a testament to the city's rich history. Hanzono Shrine, nestled within a bustling district, is a sanctuary dedicated to Inari, the Shinto deity of fertility, rice, and tea. Although relatively small compared to other Tokyo shrines, its historical significance and unique features make it a compelling destination for those seeking a deeper connection with Tokyo's cultural roots. The shrine's history dates back to the early Edo period, a time when Tokyo was known as Edo and was the seat of power for the Tokugawa shogunate. Legend has it that Hanazono Shrine was originally established by a wealthy merchant named Ishikawa Gamonzamon. According to folklore, Ishikawa had a son who was terminally ill. Desperate for a cure, he embarked on a pilgrimage to the famous Inari Shrine in nearby Osakusa. Miraculously, his son recovered after the journey. To show his gratitude, Ishikawa returned home and built a small shrine dedicated to Inari, which later became Hanazono Shrine. Like many other Tokyo shrines, Hanazono's main deity is not directly linked to the city's founding myths or legendary emperors. Instead, its focus on Inari reflects the mercantile interests and cultural exchanges that flourished during the Edo period. The choice of Inari as the principal deity was likely influenced by the region's agricultural traditions and the importance of fertility and prosperity to the local community. The shrine's location in the residential and business district adds to its appeal. Surrounded by neighborhood streets and shops, it offers a tranquil escape from the urban bustle without being tucked away in a secluded area. This accessibility makes it an integral part of the community, welcoming worshippers and visitors throughout the year. One of the most captivating aspects of Hanazono Shrine is its unique architectural design and symbolic features. Unlike the grand scale and imposing presence of larger shrines like Meiji Jingu, Hanazono Shrine exudes a sense of intimacy and simplicity. Its structure is characterized by clean lines, natural materials, and a harmonious balance between simplicity and elegance. As you approach the shrine, you'll notice the prominent torii gate, a traditional Japanese gateway that marks the transition between the mundane world and the sacred space of the shrine. The gate's bright red color and sturdy construction are typical of those found at Inari shrines throughout Japan. Passing through the toria, you'll enter a serene courtyard paved with gravel and flanked by neatly trimmed bushes. This tranquil setting invites visitors to pause, center themselves, and prepare to encounter the divine. The highlight of the shrine's architecture is the Hondan, the main hall that houses the enshrined deities. The Hondan at Hanazono Shrine is a single-story structure with a steeply pitched tiled roof and a simple but elegant design. The roof's gentle curves and delicate ridges are characteristic of traditional Japanese carpentry and add a touch of grace to the overall aesthetic. But what truly sets Hanazono Shrine apart is its connection to the earth. Unlike some shrines that are elevated on stone platforms, Hanazono's Hondan is built directly on the ground, symbolizing a sense of rootedness and continuity with nature. This design choice reflects the shrine's dedication to Inari, a deity closely associated with the cycles of the earth and the bounty of the harvest. Inside the Hondan, you'll find the Sanctum Sanctorum, where the deity Inari is venerated. The interior is typically decorated with a backdrop adorned with mythical creatures or scenes from Japanese folklore. While the specific details may vary, the overall atmosphere is one of reverence and tranquility. The shrine grounds are also home to several smaller buildings and structures that contribute to its unique character. There's a small detached pavilion which serves as a place for worshippers to gather and perform rituals. Additionally, the shrine's outer areas include a bell tower and a ceremonial washing area known as a temizuya, where visitors cleanse themselves before entering the sacred space. Hanazono Shrine's festivals and rituals play a vital role in preserving its cultural significance. Throughout the year, the shrine hosts various events that celebrate Japanese traditions and honor the deity, Inari. One of the most notable festivals is the annual Sakura Matsuri, held during the cherry blossom season. The festival features traditional music and dance performances, as well as food stalls offering local specialties. It's a joyous occasion for the community to come together and appreciate both the natural beauty of spring and the blessings of the divine. So if you find yourself wandering through the streets of Tokyo and seek a moment of tranquility amidst the urban landscape, consider visiting Hanazono Shrine. Experience the serenity of its gardens, admire its traditional architecture, and witness the vibrant festivals that bring the community together. As you do, take a moment to appreciate the deep historical and cultural significance that this unassuming shrine holds within its sacred walls. When most people think about Zen, they think about gardens. They think about sand and rocks, carefully arranged over many years by a patient monk. But the sand and the rocks are only part of the picture. In Zen gardens, there are also trees and flowers, shrubs and vines and ponds. All of these things need constant care and tending, or else they die, and the garden dies along with them. But what if instead of a garden? What if we are a tea master? Let us leave the bustle behind and enter a garden. Gravel raked in precise patterns, a wooden gate, stone basin for washing hands. This is the world of the tea master. You are he this morning. Your robes are simple, your hands steady. You have trained for decades, not in combat, but in quiet, in stillness. The guests will arrive soon. Not many, 3, perhaps 4. Friends, poets, officials. The tea room is small, uncluttered. Tatami mats. A single scroll on the wall, flower, freshly cut, in a small vase. Each element chosen, each placement considered. The water is heated in a cast-iron kettle. The cups are warmed. Bamboo whisk is laid out. You sit, you wait. When the guests enter, they bow. You bow lower. Ceremony begins. Not with speech, but with motion. You clean the bowl. You measure the matcha. You whisk. Not quickly, but in a circular rhythm that matches the breath. Each gesture matters. Each pause. Each silence. The tea is served. There is conversation, but it is soft. Topics range from the weather to a recent poem, to the feel of the tatami underfoot. Time stretches. The outside world fades. And then, as the light shifts and the tea cools, the guests rise. They bow again and leave. You clean the space? Wait. Restore each item. Sit quietly once more. There was no battle, no declaration. And yet the ceremony was complete. You have preserved something delicate, something profound. And in doing so, you have found peace. Zen is hard to explain because it isn't a thing. It's a way of being, a practice, an approach to life. In the simplest terms, Zen is about direct experience, about seeing through illusions and realizing the truth of our existence. But the truth of our existence is not a static thing. It is dynamic, fluid, ever-changing. So Zen does not have a single form. Instead, it manifests in many different ways. In the 12th century, Zen Buddhism came to China and found fertile ground among scholars and poets. As one commentator wrote, the Chinese saw in Zen a means of expressing their dissatisfaction with the Confucian-based society into which they were born. Zen offered a different path to the cultivation of the self, one less concerned with social convention and more concerned with direct experience. As the centuries passed, Zen found its way to Korea and then to Japan, just as it had in China. It took root among artists and thinkers. Take, for example, the world of tea. Tea ceremonies are a quintessentially Japanese art form. They originated during the 8th century when Buddhist monks used tea to stay awake during long periods of meditation. But it wasn't until the 15th century that tea ceremonies emerged as a distinctive cultural practice. When a man named Senno Rikyu unified the disparate elements of tea drinking and elevated it to an aesthetic ideal. His innovations included a new style of earthenware, a special way of grinding the tea, and a strict code of behavior for preparing and serving the tea. These innovations established the basic structure of the tea ceremony, which continues to this day. For practitioners, the tea ceremony is much more than a way to get caffeine. It's a meditation in motion. Each step in the ceremony has a purpose, not just for the host, but also for the guests. For example, The host must carefully sweep the courtyard in a particular pattern to cleanse the space before the guests arrive. Once inside, the guests wash their hands and the host offers them a small, bitter pill called gashi. This is to purge any distractions or impurities. From there, the tea ceremony proceeds in a series of movements and gestures that express the practitioner as harmony with nature and their fellow human beings. There is the careful measurement of the tea powder, the precise whisking technique, the slow, deliberate pour. Each action has a deeper meaning. When the host boils the water, they must judge the temperature by eye and touch. When they measure the tea, they must consider the quality of the matcha. When they pour the tea, they must pay attention to the angle of the spout. Even the silence between actions is important. It allows the participants to reflect on the meaning of the tea ceremony and contemplate the beauty of the present moment. In many ways, the tea ceremony embodies the essence of Zen. It's a practice rooted in mindfulness, in direct experience, in seeing things as they really are. By following the ancient rituals, by paying attention to every detail, the host and guests can let go of their worries and distractions and just be. Of course, this isn't easy. Like any Zen practice, the tea ceremony requires patience, discipline, and an unwavering commitment to the present moment. But the rewards are great. In the words of one tea master, the true spirit of tea lies in its ability to harmonize the heart, to bring the mind into stillness. Another example of Zen in daily life is gardening. The famous Zen gardens of Japan are more than just pretty landscapes. They're living works of art that require constant care and attention. The stones and sand are important, yes, but they don't just arrange themselves. Behind every Zen garden is a team of dedicated gardeners who work tirelessly to keep it looking its best. Just like the tea ceremony, Zen gardens are not static. They evolve over time as the seasons change and the weather takes its toll. The gardener must be constantly aware of these changes and make adjustments accordingly. The tools of the Zen gardener are simple, often just a rake and a shovel, but the work is far from simple. It requires a deep understanding of the principles of Zen Buddhism, as well as a profound respect for the natural world. Every rock and every mound of sand is placed with intention. Every leaf and every twig is carefully pruned. The goal is to create a space of perfect balance and harmony, a place where the mind can rest and the soul can wander. For the Zen gardener, the process is just as important as the product. It's not enough to just create a beautiful garden once. The garden must be tended every day, every week, every year. It's a lifelong practice that requires patience, discipline, and an unwavering commitment to the present moment. But the rewards are great, the words of one Zen gardener. Tending the garden is a form of meditation. It allows us to let go of our worries and distractions and just be. Finally, let's consider calligraphy. For Zen practitioners, calligraphy is more than just a way to write. It's a form of meditation in motion. The brush becomes an extension of the hand. The ink flows like watercolors, and the paper takes on the texture of a natural landscape. Zen calligraphers don't just copy existing works. They create their own unique pieces that express the fluidity and spontaneity of the Zen aesthetic. In fact, Zen calligraphy is often done in the midst of nature. The calligrapher might sit in a garden surrounded by trees and flowers, and let the natural world inform their brushstrokes. They might take inspiration from the gentle curve of a willow branch, or the jagged edge of a mountain peak. The result is a piece of art that is deeply connected to the natural world and to the calligrapher's own inner world. For Zen calligraphers, the process is everything. It's not enough to just produce a finished product. The journey of creating the calligraphy is what matters most. The Zen calligrapher doesn't start with a blank sheet of paper. They begin with a blank mind. They let go of all expectations and just allow the brush to flow. The ink flows across the paper like water running down a mountain stream. It's a spontaneous, unpredictable movement that cannot be forced or constrained. This kind of calligraphy is not just a way to express oneself, it's a way to connect with something larger than oneself. Calligrapher becomes a conduit for the energy of the universe, a channel through which the creative force of nature flows. It's a humbling experience that reminds us of our place in the natural order of things. Just like the tea ceremony in the Zen garden, Zen calligraphy is a practice that requires patience, discipline, and an unwavering commitment to the present moment. But the rewards are great. In the words of one Zen calligrapher, calligraphy is a form of meditation. It allows us to let go of our worries and distractions and just be. So these are just 3 examples of how Zen manifests itself in everyday life. There are many more, of course, but I hope these examples give you a sense of the depth and richness of Zen practice. It's not just about sitting in a monastery and chanting for hours on end. It's about finding moments of stillness and balance in the midst of a busy and chaotic world. It's about seeing things as they really are and letting go of our preconceptions and expectations. It's about connecting with something larger than ourselves, with the natural world, and with the people around us. If you're interested in learning more about Zen, I highly recommend checking out some of the resources below. Thanks for watching. Edo period Japan was a place of contrasts, of silence and structure, of heavy burdens and graceful rituals. The samurai dreamed of battle, but filed paperwork. The Ronin plotted for months and died in a single day. The temples were buried, but not forgotten. And the tea master, in his stillness, moved entire hearts. Night, you have walked their paths. You have stepped through their gardens. And now, as your breath slows and your mind settles, remember, history whispers. It does not shout. Sometimes, in its quietest corners, it offers the deepest rest. Sleep well. Welcome to another quiet journey through the dusty corridors of time. Tonight, we'll venture into the heart of the Roman Empire, not through its triumphs or its wars, but through the patient layering of brick upon brick, the quiet dramas of ambition and betrayal, the shadows of secret cults, and the scented halls of the Roman elite. Let your mind drift. Let the noise of the day recede, and allow yourself to settle gently into the rhythm of lives long gone. We begin our story not in a palace or a battlefield, but under the hot sun, on the crumbling edge of empire, among men whose names were never written down. Rome was not built in a day, but by the end of its building, it would have been about 400 years in the making. That's how long this civilization lasted. As we all know, Rome fell in the year 476 AD, but Rome wasn't really built in that one fell swoop either. It took centuries to complete. Construction of Rome didn't just stop after a couple hundred years of building either. Cities across the vast Roman Empire each had their own construction projects. For the lower classes, though, life went on without the boom in construction. Rome may have eventually become a great metropolis, but for most people, life never really changed much. Welcome to my channel. Today we're answering the extraordinary prompt. What was the daily life like for a Roman construction worker? As always, if you find this video educational and entertaining, then please be sure to smash that like button and subscribe so you never miss a video. We're already halfway towards our goal of 100,000 subscribers. So now let's jump into the video. Life as a Roman construction worker was never comfortable, but it did come with certain perks, depending on which side of the tool belt you were on. If you were a wealthy landowner who hired others to do the dirty work, you probably saw construction as a necessary evil. But if you were the one getting up before sunrise and working until sundown, then you probably cursed the whole project from the bottom of your heart. We can get a sense of what it might have been like to live as a Roman construction worker from the movie Gladiator. In the film, Russell Crowe plays Maximus, a Roman general who is betrayed and sold into slavery. He ends up working as a gladiator, but for a while he is also forced to do construction work. In one particularly heartbreaking scene, Maximus and his fellow slaves are forced to help construct a new Colosseum in Rome. They carry rocks up tall, rickety scaffolding, and haul them up to the top of the structure. It's exhausting work, and the lead slave driver is extremely cruel. Even as Maximus grows angrier and angrier at his captors, he dutifully works away at the massive project. Although there aren't any records written from the perspective of a Roman construction worker, we can make a few educated guesses about their daily lives, based on the laws written for them and about them. Much like in ancient Greece, most construction work in ancient Rome was done by slaves. These slaves were typically prisoners of war and were considered property, meaning they could be bought, sold, or traded like any other object. Slaves who were unworking on farms or ranches were usually given jobs working in a trade such as a tailor, potter, carpenter, or mason. Construction work was a lot less safe than most of those trades, but that didn't matter because the owner didn't care about the safety of his property. He only cared about getting the job done quickly and for as cheap as possible. the owner of a construction crew likely employed several different tradesmen to carry out his vision. Architects would design the buildings, surveyors would determine where to lay foundations, scribes would make detailed plans. Masons were responsible for cutting and laying bricks. Stonemasons carved stone blocks, carpenters assembled the scaffolding, and hod carriers carried bricks and cement up tall ladders. Slaves were paid nothing for their hard work, but they were given food and somewhere to sleep. Their masters usually provided housing, although it was often overcrowded, unsanitary, and dangerous. While movies and television shows often portray Roman architecture as incredibly advanced, the reality was that ancient Romans used very primitive equipment and tools. Although Romans invented several tools that made construction easier and more efficient, such as the concrete mix that allowed for much larger structures, they mostly used brute force to get the job done. Many tools used in Roman construction would look familiar to us today. They used hand tools such as hammers, saws, chisels, drills, levels, plummets, and squares. They also used simple machines such as ramps, levers, pulleys, and cranes. Cranes were typically made from wood and rope and were used to lift objects too heavy for any man to move on his own. While they were incredibly useful, they also came with inherent risks. If a crane collapsed, everyone nearby would be crushed to death. Workday started at around 4 a.m., since that was when the sun began to rise. Workers would begin their shifts hours before the heat of the day, and they would work until around 8 p.m. when the temperature began to drop. Overtime was expected, especially when deadlines approached. Lunch breaks were rare, but when they happened, workers ate whatever they had brought with them from home. When a project was finished, workers would celebrate with feasts and drink until they were too drunk to continue working. The parties often went late into the night, which meant workers were exhausted the following morning. Discipline was strict on Roman construction sites. Most workers weren't actually Roman citizens, so they had very few rights. Masters could punish their workers as they pleased. And if a slave was caught stealing materials or trying to escape, they were often put to death. Accidents were common, and there was no such thing as workers' compensation. If a worker was injured on the job, they were simply left where they fell. Seriously injured workers were sometimes put out of their misery with a quick stab of a dagger. When workers died on the job, they were typically buried in mass graves along the outskirts of the city. It wasn't all bad being a Roman construction worker. As mentioned before, there were parties and feasts when a project was completed. The pay was pretty good for the time period. Masters typically paid workers in grain, wine, and oil, and that money could then be used to buy goods and services throughout the city. Housing was also free, as well as food while you were working. Most importantly, you got to see the end result of your hard work. Every time a Roman went to watch a chariot race at the Circus Maximus or stroll through the Pantheon, they could take a moment to admire the work they had done with their own two hands. Depending on the type of construction happening, there were a few different careers you could choose. One of the biggest construction projects a city undertook was the building of roads. Building roads was important because it helped transport goods and troops more efficiently. Romans constructed paved roads throughout their empire. Road construction required a variety of jobs, including surveyor, grader, leveler, mixer, bricklayer, stone layer, and repairman. Roads were built to last, but they often suffered serious damage during the winter months due to rain and snow. Road crews spent much of their time repairing damage from the weather. Aqueducts were another huge undertaking. Aqueducts supplied water to cities, towns, and even the countryside. Workers constructing aqueducts were typically experts in civil engineering. They used arches and other architectural innovations to keep the flow of water steady. Since aqueducts were so important to the Roman way of life, the people of Rome held the construction workers in high regard. Construction workers were usually outsiders, people who were taken from their homes during the conquests of Rome and forced to work under penalty of death. The lucky ones were volunteers who enlisted in the military and then deserted to become construction workers. Deserters were usually treated horribly, but at least they were able to support themselves by trading their labor for food and coins. Let's take a look at the lives of Roman construction workers from a different angle. What did the masters say about their employees? It's easy to imagine Roman construction bosses as heartless jerks, and that's probably true. Still, they did offer some benefits to their employees, or maybe that's just what they said in public. One Roman official wrote, "I myself have looked after the feeding. and lodging of my laborers, and provided for the poor an amount of oil, wine, and wheat each day. Another said to the builders of roads, I give yearly distributions of grain and oil, and for clothing a cloak apiece and a tunic apiece. Now, those don't sound like bad perks, but remember that these guys owned their workers. They were literally buying and selling human beings. Much of what we know about Roman construction workers comes from the writings of Pliny the Younger. Pliny wrote extensively about Roman law, and in his letters, he often mentioned construction workers. Pliny referred to construction workers as servants, which was a term used to describe anyone who worked for wages. In one letter, Pliny advised a friend to hire servants for a country estate. He wrote, "You should get some artisans to come over, a carpenter, a smith, a mason, and a tile maker." Another source for information on Roman construction workers is a letter written by a woman named Nedia to her son. Nedia was a Roman noblewoman who lived in Athens, and she wrote the letter to her son who was studying to become an architect. In the letter, she gave him advice on hiring servants. She told her son to hire a secretary, a valet, a cook, a gardener, a painter, a plumber, a mason, and a barber. Whether you were the master or the slave, life as a Roman construction worker was never boring. The work was hard, and the conditions were dangerous, but the payoff was worth it. After all, construction workers were responsible for building some of the greatest structures in history. Now it's time for you to build something amazing. Comment below with your ideas for future videos. And while you're at it, please smash that like button and subscribe if you haven't already. Thanks for watching. Bye. This is a story of ambition. It's a story of how one man clawed his way up to the top of the pile, only to be unceremoniously dumped down into the abyss. A story of a man who was so close to power yet never got a chance to taste it. This is the story of Gaius, or rather Lucius Aelius Sejanus. When I say that Gaius wasn't born great, I mean that he was far from it. There's not much known about his early life. So much of what we know comes from what others wrote about him, which isn't saying much because most of them hated him. What little there is, though, paints a picture of a man of humble beginnings. Sejanus hailed from a minor Roman family that didn't hold much clout. You know those families? The ones whose name doesn't even appear in history books unless they have something to do with a scandal or a disaster? Yeah, those. Despite coming from such a background, Sejanus had big dreams, dreams that soared high above his station. His sights were set on the very peak of power in the vast expanse of the Roman Empire. He wanted to be an emperor. The road to the top is often paved with education and connections, and Sejanus was smart enough to realize this, so he schooled himself well. To everyone's surprise, including probably his own, he ended up doing quite well for himself. When he was young, he successfully ran for a position in the lower house of the Roman assembly, the tribune of the plebs. Later on, he moved on to bigger things, taking on the role of military tribune. That's the lowest ranked officer in the Roman army. And around the same time, he was appointed commander of the Praetorian Guard, the elite military force responsible for protecting the emperor. It was a prestigious position, one that many influential senators would kill to get. You might be wondering, how did a guy from a no-name family suddenly land such important roles? Well, it was all thanks to one man, Tiberius. Tiberius had recently taken the throne after a series of power struggles following the death of Augustus, Rome's first emperor. Now, despite being related to Augustus by marriage, he wasn't exactly in Augustus's good books. During Augustus's reign, Tiberius had gotten exiled twice. So when he ascended to the throne, he wanted to surround himself with new faces, people who owed their allegiance to him and not to Augustus. And this is when he placed Sejanus as the commander of the Praetorian Guard. It was a good pick, see. While Sejanus might have lacked noble connections, he excelled in one key area, loyalty. His commitment to his new boss was unwavering. He dropped everything to follow Tiberius into exile when the emperor was banished by Augustus. And it was this absolute loyalty that caught Tiberius's attention. Now, appointing someone from a minor family to such a crucial role might have raised eyebrows, but Sejanus proved his worth over time. He secured the safety of Tiberius, navigating the complex world of imperial politics and keeping the emperor secure. But he did more than just follow orders. He started giving them. Slowly but surely, he edged his way into the emperor's inner circle, becoming a counselor, a confidant, and ultimately one of the most powerful men in Rome. At least that's what it seemed like. The truth was far more complex, a tangled web of power, deceit, and control. Tiberius was a peculiar ruler. He took pride in his ability to appear aloof and detached, like a statue frozen in marble. But this demeanor hid a sharp, calculating mind. Tiberius ruled with calculated precision, much like a puppet master pulling invisible strings. While he initially appeared to trust Sejanus, it was a trust built on necessity, not fondness. He chose Sejanus not because he liked him, but because he needed someone who could match his intellect, someone who could navigate the treacherous waters of imperial politics as he did. And Sejanus understood his emperor perfectly. He knew how to play the game, making the right moves at the right moments. He bided his time, learning the intricacies of power, waiting for the perfect opportunity to make his move. When Tiberius decided to withdraw from the affairs of Rome, retreating to the island of Capri, leaving Sejanus in charge, it seemed like fate had dealt him his winning card. It appeared as if Sejanus was now the de facto ruler of Rome. People started believing that he had become the emperor in all but name. Some even claimed that he already was the emperor. However, appearances can be deceiving. While Sejanus reveled in this apparent triumph, Tiberius was quietly orchestrating his downfall. Power, you see, is a jealous mistress. And when she senses a potential rival, she turns. And this is exactly what happened with Tiberius. Though he appeared to step back, he never truly let go. From his island retreat, he kept a watchful eye on the capital, pulling the strings of power from afar. And Sejanus, blinded by his own ambition, failed to see the danger signs. Let me paint a picture for you. Imagine standing on the deck of a ship sailing through calm waters. The sun is shining, the wind is light, and you feel on top of the world. Suddenly a storm appears out of nowhere. The waves rise, the winds scream, and the very stability of your world is shaken. This is what happened to Sejanus. He experienced the suddenness of a winter storm, while basking in the false belief of perpetual summer. While Sejanus made decisions as if he were the emperor, Tiberius quietly observed, gathering intelligence and plotting his former confidant's demise. In the Senate, he had loyal allies keeping tabs on Sejanus, feeding him information and ensuring that the emperor was always in the know. These informants were like poisonous mushrooms growing in the cracks of power, spreading their toxic spores of deceit and betrayal. They poisoned the ears of Tiberius against Sejanus, whispering half-truths and exaggerating every misstep Sejanus made. They told stories of how Sejanus, in his unchecked authority, was becoming a mini-emperor, ruling over Rome with an iron fist. They painted a picture of a man consumed by power, willing to do anything to maintain his grip on the reins of the empire. Slowly but surely, they chipped away at the facade created by Sejanus, revealing the ambitious man hiding underneath. As the whispers grew louder, Tiberius's trust in Sejanus began to crumble like an old tomb left unattended. Once the foundation of loyalty was eroded, it was only a matter of time before the final blow was struck. The fall of Sejanus was as swift as it was brutal. Tiberius, armed with the reports from his loyal spies, called Sejanus to his side. Ending their friendship with the chill efficiency of a well-oiled machine, in front of the stunned Senate, Sejanus was stripped of his powers and his reputation. His name dragged through the mud, his actions twisted to portray him as a traitor. It was a masterful display of political maneuvering, a chess game where Tiberius was the grand master and Sejanus the pawn. With his downfall, Tiberius sent a clear message to anyone who dared to dream of power. Loyalty was not just expected, it was demanded. Betrayal, even if hidden, would never go unnoticed. And with that, the tale of Sejanus, the man who almost became the emperor, was sealed in the annals of history. His story serves as a reminder that ambition, if unchecked, can lead to ruin. Power, if pursued too greedily, can turn into a curse. Sometimes the greatest victories are won not on the battlefield, but in the shadows of deceit and betrayal. And sometimes the deadliest enemies are not outside, but within the closest circles of power. Now, what's your take on Sejanus? Do you think he had it coming? Or was he a victim of circumstance? Share your thoughts below. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button. If you enjoyed this episode, you might also like our other videos, especially this one. Mithras is a forgotten god, a deity once so popular that temples to him were built all over the Roman Empire from Britain to Iran. He even had his own feast day on December, but today he is unknown. No one worships him. His name isn't even spoken. This is our story. Let us now descend not into conspiracy, but into shadow. Beneath the bustling streets of ancient Rome, past the bathhouses and markets, there existed a different kind of sanctuary, low-ceilinged, lit by flickering oil lamps, cool still and secret. These were the Mithria temples of Mithras, god of light and contract, of cosmic battle and eternal loyalty. The cult of Mithras was a mystery religion, practiced mostly by soldiers and men of rank. Its rites were never written, only whispered, passed from initiate to initiate. Step into one of these temples now. The walls are carved with images of Mithras slaying the Bula symbol, rich with celestial meaning. Around you, men gather, quietly. Each has passed through levels of initiation. Each has vowed silence. They wear cloaks, their faces are solemn. They eat together bread and wine shared on low stone benches. They reenact stories of cosmic struggle. The atmosphere is not festive, but reverent. Time seems suspended here, cut off from the noise of the city above. What exactly did they believe? I can only guess. The alignment of stars, the struggle between light and darkness, brotherhood forged in secrecy. And then, as quietly as they arrived, they leave, returning to their posts, their families, their ordinary Roman lives. The temple remains empty, still waiting. This is all that remains of the great god Mithras. A few fragments of sculpture, some Roman frescoes, a smattering of names and places, a handful of objects like this. An altar dedicated to him found at the Syrian city of Geropos. Two men named Titus Flavius, Mithras, and Titus Flavius Secundus, priest of the god. A few lines of poetry, one from the Greek poet Nonnus, who speaks of Mithras as the leader of the gods, another from Martian Capella, who puts him among the immortals feasting at the end of the world. In the ruins of these great cities, we find these scraps of his worship. Here is where the faithful gathered. Here is where the sacrifices were made. Here is where prayers went up and down from the earth to the sky. Here is where the mysteries were performed, where men became brothers. And finally, here is where his presence was felt. There are other gods whose absence we have examined, those erased from the public square, removed from the coins and monuments, banned from memory. But Mithras disappeared of his own accord, as the last fires of his worship sputtered out. Its practitioners simply stopped being Mithraic. They shed their cloaks and abandoned their rituals, gave up their bread and wine, left the temples, and walked away from the mysteries without taking a single relic with them. So no one knows why they believed what they did, or how they came to stop believing. All we have is the architecture, silent testimony to the spaces between their prayers. What do we know of Mithras? Where did he come from? If no one knows, then let me tell you, I will be bold and say, I know the answer to that. If no one knows, then it must be true. He was an Indo-Aeonian god, born among the nomadic horsemen of the steppes. Sky god, storm god, god of contracts and oaths. His name means friendless, a lonely warrior on high. He was sacrificed by his father to bring about the creation of the world, only to be rescued by his mother, the earth goddess, who raised him on her lap. Thus did he become lord of heaven and earth. With his axe, he separated light from darkness, ordered the heavens and the earth. And at the equinoxes, when day and night are equal, he slew the sacred bull, unleashing the powers of nature, giving life to all things. When the bull split open, from its flanks sprung forth the gods, and from the gushing blood flowed forth the mortal race. He was known in Greece as Zeus-bound, even worshipped in Athens beside the Acropolis. Alexander the Great knew him. Octavian Augustus adopted his iconography, wore his symbols. The Emperor Hadrian journeyed to the east to see his birthplace, yet none of these men could contain him, for Mithras was always more than any culture could grasp, more than any creed could keep. Then Rome took him in and wove him into her tapestry, but she couldn't make him hers. The temples we see scattered throughout her empire bear witness to that. Built at legionary forts and trading posts, in mining towns and along caravan routes, in the far corners of the empire. Usually beneath houses or shops, sometimes hidden behind false facades, as if the Romans themselves knew they were building shrines to a god who didn't belong to this world. And inside these shrines, silent rituals unfolded. The Roman soldier in full armor, laying aside his weapons at the entrance, the merchant leaving the grime of the road outside, the miner escaping the damp and dark. They shed the burdens of their lives. Each man would have come alone, each would have entered silently, each would have stood before the altar and renewed his vows. Given thanks for his safekeeping, asked for blessings on his travels. Each man would have been met by others, brothers of the same order, sealed by the same mysteries, linked across time and space. At first, scholars thought the cult began in the 3rd century BCE, that it grew alongside the Mithraic mysteries in Greece, that it fell apart after the fall of the Western Empire. But recently, some argue that the Romans actually invented this cult, that its origins lie in the East Roman period, that the Romans created this god, fashioned him to their liking. I suppose anything is possible. But what would be the point? Why would they have done it? Who needs a god who doesn't belong to this world? His cult was divided into degrees. First the raven, then the torch. After that, the scourge. Next, the sword. Then the crown. Finally, the scepter. In later times, they were called the lion, the bull, the raven, the serpent, the fire, the wind, the water, the earth. For each, the candidate was tested. He endured beatings and hardship, hunger and thirst. He wrestled naked in the snow, slept in the rain, walked barefoot over burning embers. Those who survived were initiated. Those who completed the final trials, crowned with laurel, were given the secret name, the formula, the sacred banquet. We don't know what the formula was, but we know some of the prayers and hymns. They tell of the 7 bulls, the cosmic guardians, each ruling a different part of the world, of the birth of the sun, of the healing waters, of the tree of life. They tell of Mithras teaching the constellations to mortals, of his dog chasing the moon, of his bull leaping the mountains. They tell of his battles against the dragon and the giant, of his sacrifice of himself, of his victory over the powers of darkness. They tell of men joining the army of light, of the faithful gathering to hear his word, of the procession of the gods on the day of reckoning. They tell of the Lord of the stars, King of kings, of justice, truth, oath, contract, friendship, and love. These verses might have been recited by a candidate as he approached the altar. They might have been sung by priests during the procession, might have been chanted by initiates as they watched the sacred play. It's only speculation, of course. No one knows for sure. No one can say what secrets these temples held, what rituals they saw, what truths they concealed. I think of a modern boy, a believer in nothing, living among the ruins of a godless age, searching for answers in the wrong places, spending all his time among the noise of crowds, among the clamor of commerce, among the violence of the screen. He thinks he is connected. He thinks he understands. He thinks he belongs. But what if the world is too loud? What if the crowds are blinding him? What if the commotion is keeping him from seeing? There is a place below the clamor, a quiet place beneath the noise, a place of shadows. And if he would only go there, if he would only listen to the whispers, then maybe he, too, could join the brotherhood. Maybe he would find someone just like him, someone who knows, who understands, someone who is waiting for him. But the world is too loud, and he can't hear the call. Or perhaps he doesn't want to. Perhaps he prefers the darkness. He is happier lost in the crowd. And so he goes back to the surface, back to the chatter, back to the crush. And the temple waits below, empty, still waiting. If you would like to know more about Forgotten Gods, please consider subscribing. Also, we have released a new podcast. You can listen to an episode right now wherever you get your podcasts. If you would like to support us directly, please consider becoming a patron. Thank you for watching. Goodbye. The Senate had its whores. In taverns along the waterfront, men spoke of their wiles, and whiles away ours with drink and dice. There were women in taverns too, some serving drinks, others there to serve up something else, their bodies. For money, for power, or if they were desperate, for survival, they traded sex for coin or connection. I'm the author of a historical fiction series set in ancient Rome, and now we are going to meet Livia, one of the wives of Roman senators. Before we dive into her story, though, please subscribe if you have not already, so that you will be notified when each new episode is released. You can also find more information about the series in the description below. And now, on with the story. Now let us return to the surface, but not to the dust of labor or the cold of cult chambers. Let us enter a different world entirely, world of perfumed courtyards and quiet performances. The life of a Roman senator's wife was a life of visibility. From the moment she rose, often before the household servants, she was on display. Her appearance, her manners, her words all carefully observed. She awoke in a room of her own in the insula, the apartment block within the city walls where she lived with her husband and their children. Servants were already stirring. The oil lamp flickered. The rooster had crowed outside. She sat up in bed, the fine linen sheet falling from her breasts, the delicate fingers delicately trailing across the coverlet, smoothing out wrinkles, straightening the folds. If she was alone, she would call for a maid and together they would rise, ready for the day ahead. Sometimes she was awakened by her husband, his hand resting on her shoulder, his fingers kneading the flesh of her neck, his lips murmuring in her ear the necessity of rising, the business that awaited. Their children would rouse later, their nurse already there to bathe them, dry them and dress them in the finest clothes their father's money could buy. Her morning began in the atrium, the heart of their home, surrounded by columns. This inner courtyard boasted a fountain in its center. Sunlight streamed through the open peristyle, dancing over marble and mosaic floors. Here, a maid helped her dress. She did not dress for comfort, not for warmth, nor for ease. She dressed for effect, the better to be seen in. Fine fabrics, carefully pinned. Hair, perhaps a necklace of imported pearls. She would select her clothing for the day, selecting from the many garments provided by her mother's family, her dowry, her status, her position. They dictated what she could wear and when she was married. She wore only the colors assigned to matrons, no bright hues for her, no patterns that shouted for attention. Her outfit would be tasteful, elegant, refined, an image of decorum. Then the day unfolded in quiet rituals. If she was fortunate, the morning passed in comfortable routines. Overseeing the household, receiving guests, listening to political murmurs shared in confidence. Her visitors would be other matrons, their status and station equal to her own, their conversation polite, their gossip well-placed. A vase of wine, sweet perfume, a banquet soon to be prepared. All the while, the world beyond the atrium walls continued its clamorous existence. But here in the courtyard, tranquility prevailed. She might write letters. Now, dip your quill in ink. Carefully form the letters, forming words, sending greetings, sharing news, but rarely offering opinions. What went on in her mind was largely her own. She could read, but she rarely did. Books were expensive, and if she wished for a volume of poetry or history, her husband would purchase it for her. But she did not pore over books. She preferred to hear them read aloud, so a slave girl would sit at her feet, reading poetry as the wife embroidered or arranged flowers in a vase. She chose subjects for these arrangements herself, setting them in clay or gold or silver vases, no glass for her, and she used them to decorate her home, sending out 4 fresh blooms every few days. She expected her slaves to teach her children to do the same, teaching them the names of plants and blossoms, how to shape branches and vines, how to make even weeds appear cultivated. She might supervise the education of her children. Tutors would arrive, their faces grave, their voices echoing in the halls. Boys and girls learning to read, learning their letters, practicing rhetoric, memorizing history, all the while preparing for their futures, preparing for their roles in society. She would expect her sons to master their studies, to show prowess in athletics, to embody the virtues of Roman manhood. Her daughters would learn the skills expected of them, how to weave, how to dye cloth, how to make perfumes, how to decorate a house, how to manage a household. And most importantly, her daughters would learn how to be seen, how to speak, how to gesture, how to behave. She might visit the marketplace. This was not a place a woman should go alone, but she would be accompanied by slaves or her daughters. Walking between stalls overflowing with vegetables, fruit, fish, flowers, spices, grain, and wine, their baskets would be filled with provisions for the household, her purse with coins to distribute as she saw fit. In the forum, she would see merchants displaying wares from the East: linens, glassware, perfume, precious stones, and metals. Her slaves would accompany her, carrying empty baskets and purses. They would haggle over prices, weighing goods and quality, inspecting items for flaws, exchanging money for wares. and then they would return home. Afternoons brought salons, not the kind that we know today, filled with canvases and easels and paint. These were small gatherings of friends, maybe 2 or 3 other women, and 1 or 2 men, her husband's colleagues or clients, their children, older men looking for a quiet hour. Over cups of wine, they would talk about poetry and lineage and philosophy, nothing controversial, nothing too emotional. That would spoil the tranquility of the atmosphere. Women like her would not speak their minds. They would not share personal feelings or controversial opinions. They would not discuss politics. They would not engage in heated debate. They would maintain composure, decorum, dignity. As evening fell, a dinner was hosted. Guests would arrive, reclining on couches or settling onto chairs. Slaves would bring forth dishes of food, appetizers, first courses, main courses, desserts. Music drifted from hidden musicians. The wife would hold court, greeting people, saying pleasantries, laughing quietly, sipping wine, never raising her voice, never losing control. She did not serve. She did not pour. She did not cook. She did not clean. She did not stoop to such tasks. She commanded respect, obedience, attention. She listened. She conversed. She partook of the entertainment. She may have danced, though rarely. She might have sung, though never without accompaniment. She watched the musicians, the acrobats, the comedians. She laughed. She applauded. She moved through the rooms, through the guests, graceful, never drawing attention, yet always commanding it. Then, as the house quieted, she retired to her room, sometimes alone, sometimes beside her husband, depending on his politics that week. The mistress of the house and the master of the house did not always sleep in the same bed. Powerful men kept mistresses. Wealthy men had harems. Senators had concubines. Roman men desired variety. They wanted pleasure. They sought diversion. And if their wives were not pleasing them, they found satisfaction elsewhere. The wife understood this. She knew her value. She knew her worth. She kept her distance. She maintained decorum. She endured the public displays of her husband's egoism because she had worth beyond him. She had status. She had connections. She had power. In the stillness, she reflected upon the day. She considered her plans for tomorrow. What gifts would she send? To whom what banquets would she host? Which guests would she invite? Which parties would she attend? Who would she entertain? Who would entertain her? She was a performer. She had been trained in the arts of expression, the rules of etiquette, the expectations of decorum. Every day she played her part. She played it well. She played it often. Her world was gilded, but never fully her own. Tomorrow, the performance would begin again. The Roman world was built not only by emperors and generals, but by hands blistered from stone, by whispered vows in shadowed rooms, by ambitions that rose and fell in silence, and by lives lived beneath the weight of expectation. Tonight, you have walked their roads, felt the rhythm of their days, and glimpsed their hidden corners. And now, as your mind begins to quiet, remember this. History is not only what happened, it is what was endured, what was whispered, and what gently remains. Sleep well. Welcome back. Tonight we step into a world coated in gold leaf and drenched in perfume. But this is not the Versailles of the postcards or the polished legends. This is the palace as it was lived, behind the velvet curtains, beneath the chandeliers, and in the narrow corridors that never made it into the portraits. Versailles is often remembered as a glittering symbol of French grandeur, and it was. But like all symbols, it came at a cost. A cost paid not just by kings and queens, but by cooks, porters, courtiers, and silent onlookers whose names never entered the history books. So let the noise of your day fade. Settle in, and prepare to drift into a world where every breath was measured, every gesture a performance, and every moment governed by ritual. We begin with a pair of tired hands lacing another woman's corset before the sun has risen. Hello, my name is Anonymous. I'm a writer living in France. I'm here to talk to you about Versailles, specifically the servants of Versailles. As many of you know, I've written several historical romance novels set at the court of Louis XIV. Those novels center around a particular group of people, or the nobles of the court. They are the Sun King's favorites. They fight for his favor. They scheme to win his ear. But the Sun King and his nobles are only a small part of what made Versailles tick. Versailles was a city unto itself. It contained shops and businesses, farms and fields, gardens and woods, and most importantly, a vast quantity of servants. If you were born in the 17th century, chances are that if you lived within the walls of Versailles, you were nothing more than a servant. You would never be invited into the royal apartments, yet you would affect the life of the king. In fact, the Sun King would not have been able to do anything he did without the help of thousands of servants. That's a big statement, and I intend to prove it to you. Let's imagine you are one of those servants. Imagine waking in the dark. Not by choice, but by duty. The room you sleep in is small, high up in one of the lesser-known attics of Versailles. It is a converted space, barely insulated, where the wind creeps through the shutters and the air is heavy with dust. There are no fine silks or feather mattresses here, just a thin blanket, coarse linen sheets, and a wooden cot that creaks each time you shift. You are a femme de chambre, a lady's maid. Your entire purpose is to anticipate the needs of someone who considers you invisible, unless you are. You light a small oil lamp. You wash your face with chilled water from a ceramic basin. There is no breakfast waiting, perhaps a crust of yesterday's bread tucked away. You eat in silence, listening to the muffled sounds of the palace waking, the crackle of fires being lit, shuffle of others just like you. By the time the lady of the house begins to stir, you have already prepared her garments. Each layer has a purpose, and each mistake can cost you your position. The corset must be tight, but not too tight. The lace must lie flat, her shoes polished, her jewelry precisely chosen. All of this done without speaking unless spoken to. You must anticipate, not presume. Once she is dressed, you remain nearby, but not too close. You stand in silence as she is received by guests or readies herself for court. Hours pass. Your feet ache. You are still, but never idle. You watch. You wait. You might run errands down the long marble corridors. Deliver letters, mend torn silk. Clean stains no one else noticed. You must always appear unhurried, though you are always running behind. Gossip flows like wine in this palace. A misplaced glance, a late arrival, a forgotten ribbon. All can spark suspicion. You know the stories of others dismissed for trifles, escorted from the grounds without so much as a farewell. Meals for you come late and cold, if at all. You eat quickly, often standing before returning to your post. At night, you return to your little attic room, legs sore, hands chapped, voice unused, and you sleep. It's not deeply, but enough to begin again. This was not the life of nobility, but of proximity to it. Close enough to touch, yet never to belong. For while we may picture Versailles as a place of opulence, of intrigue, of absolute monarchy, what made it go round was the efforts of thousands of people whose job it was to keep it running smoothly. No matter how grand the Sun King or how fabulous his nobles, they needed people to make their lives possible. People like you. There were many positions to which you could aspire as a servant at Versailles, but none were easy. You might become an artichout, a sort of personal gofferer to the king, carrying his clothes, polishing his shoes, mending his linens. Or you could end up as a cuisiner working in the kitchens under the direction of the chef de cuisine, making sure the king and his nobles were fed properly and plentifully. There were stable hands, gardeners, wood gatherers, coachmen, laundresses, and so many more positions, each demanding quiet obedience and strong nerves. For not only was it difficult work, but any mistake could mean losing your position, perhaps even being asked to leave the grounds without your head. And while your life would be hard, it would also be full of small rewards. You might see the king up close when no one else could, hear the latest news before anyone else, eat food fit for a king, though after the king had been served. And if you survived, you would witness history being made, the likes of which no other age has seen. So let's go back to our scenario. As a femme de chambre, your life revolved around the woman you served. You would wake before her, anticipating her needs. Dress her, feed her, style her hair, help her bathe, put on her finery. Then stand back and watch as she became the picture of 17th century elegance. She would attend the court, meeting the nobles, hearing the latest gossip, learning the news of the realm, and you would be there beside her, unseen, unheard, but ready to answer any call. Now this is a very generalized idea of a lady's maid, but these women were the eyes and ears of the court. They knew what was going on because their ladies often couldn't attend everything. And when the lady was busy, the maid had to take care of business for her. What would happen if the lady left a glove behind? The maid would have to retrieve it. If the lady spilled wine on a particularly fine gown, the maid would have to dry the stain as best she could. If the queen summoned the lady to her chambers, the maid would have to go along and stand guard outside the door while her mistress plotted, schemed, or confided in the queen. Now, if you were an artichout, your day would look much different. You might start early, helping to get the king's clothes ready for the day, pressing his breeches, polishing his hose, mending a tear in his doublet. You would help him dress, but your duties wouldn't end there. You would travel with the king, carrying his linen, fetching his food, polishing his armor, attending him in the privy. In short, you would do everything necessary to ensure that the king was presentable, fed, and clean. As you can see, life at Versailles, even if you were not a noble, was never dull. While we tend to think of Versailles as synonymous with luxury, this was only true for a select few. For everyone else, it was a busy, exhausting existence, filled with more work than one could ever imagine doing. But it was also an adventure, one that saw the average person rubbing shoulders with royalty, maybe even becoming part of history themselves. Thank you for watching this video. Madame de Pompadour, King Louis XV's longtime mistress, has gone down in history as an archetype of female wiles, someone who used their sexuality to climb to unimaginable heights of power. This common perception of her life is somewhat true, but today we are going to look at how her life actually unfolded, from her humble beginnings to the highest levels of French society. We will also see how her position as the king's mistress gave her more power than many women in positions of even greater wealth and status. Though some sources claim that Jean Antoinette Poison was born in Paris, most evidence points towards her being born in the village of her father was a simple bourgeois man, a middle-class lawyer who enjoyed some prestige within his community. Her mother, Louise, however, was a force to be reckoned with. After Louise and Jean Sr. were married, they moved to Paris, where Jean Sr. got a job as a clerk at the Parliament of Paris. Though this job paid well enough, he wasn't careful with his money and eventually managed to squander the family fortune on gambling debts. In response to this devastating turn of events, the family patriarch took the drastic step of disinheriting his son, renouncing him and leaving the family entirely. With no other options left, Jean Sr. took his family and fled 2 tours in an attempt to start anew. It was during this time of destitution that Louise began plotting her daughter Cerise out of the ashes of their family's fortune. As legend would have it, Louise had visited a fortune teller earlier in her daughter's life, who had told her that Jean would one day win the heart of a king. Now, emboldened by this prophecy, Louise was determined to do whatever it took to make sure that her daughter would one day live a life of luxury and comfort. Why? So when the family moved to Tours, she enrolled young Jean into a prestigious boarding school run by nuns, where she received an elite education uncommon for girls of her status. While there, she was taught poetry, philosophy, music, and conversation, not merely to entertain, but to disarm. Though this was hardly the life that her brother received, as he was sent to work as an apprentice barber to learn a trade. Clearly, Louise had decided that her daughter's future would lie in marrying well rather than remaining pure for a good Catholic marriage. After spending several years in Tours, the family returned to Paris and began climbing the social ladder. First, with a series of advantageous marriages brokered by Louise, which slowly rebuilt the family fortune. Next, with the now well-educated and worldly Jean catching the eye of a certain royal governess, Madame de Montespan. It was thanks to this connection that the family got their big break and entry into the inner circles of the French court. Jean's rise to prominence, however, would come from her own merits as she caught the eye of the Sun King himself, Louis XV. At first, her relationship was purely sexual, with Jean acting as one of several mistresses to the king. Over time, however, the nature of their relationship changed as Louis became enamored with Jean and brought her into the heart of the French court. While official records contain nothing about the exact timeline of their relationship, historians estimate that Louis was first introduced to Jean around 1741. At this point, she would have been around 20 years old. The turning point in the relationship came 2 years later, when Louis invited her to spend the summer with him at Versailles. Upon meeting the Sun King, Jean had made a grand entrance wearing a dress that emphasized her figure, a low-cut gown of green silk adorned with diamonds. However, while this initial introduction might have been jarring, over time, Jean grew accustomed to court life, learning the intricacies of protocol and etiquette. Soon, she was no longer hidden in the shadows, but openly recognized as the king's companion. As such, she became the most prominent of the king's mistresses, receiving the title of the Marquise de Pompadour, a noble title created specifically for her. In addition to the title, Louis showered her with gifts, including magnificent apartments at Versailles directly across from his own, complete with lavish furnishings and decorations. These apartments were more than just a place for her to stay. They were a symbol of her elevated status. Moreover, unlike other mistresses before her, she was not hidden away in a chateau outside the kingdom or relegated to a small apartment somewhere in Versailles, but openly received in the grand halls of the palace. Yet the rumors surrounding her unconventional rise to power did not abate. Courtiers whispered, they mocked her origins, they scoffed at her influence. Yet Pompadour persevered, surviving in part because she mastered the game of appearances. She never overreached, but she never retreated either. Rather, she held her ground, engaging with the very people who doubted her legitimacy. She surrounded herself with artists like the painter of the king, to whom she commissioned portraits of herself and her associates, ensuring her image was carefully crafted and widely disseminated throughout the courts. She also cultivated relationships with influential figures such as the artists with whom she shared a deep intellectual connection, exchanging letters on art, philosophy, and literature. She patronized the arts and sciences, hosting salons that attracted some of the brightest minds of the time, including the likes of Voltaire, who praised her intelligence and wit. Through these alliances, she neutralized potential enemies and advocates. She positioned herself as a patron, not just a mistress, demonstrating that her intellect and cultural influence transcended her controversial status. Even so, the birth of her son in 1745 didn't help matters. Despite this, she never tried to legitimize him, understanding the limitations placed on children born out of wedlock. Instead, she ensured he received the best education money could buy, grooming him for a future in the church. He would eventually become the bishop of a testament to his mother's investment in his future. Having secured her son's future, Pompadour turned her attention to her own legacy, commissioning a self-portrait in which she is depicted in all her finery, solidifying her image as a symbol of luxury and elegance. This portrait, along with others, became iconic representations of the Rococo era, a style she greatly influenced. Her apartments were also a testament to her legacy, serving as a canvas for artists like to decorate with motifs that celebrated her and her status. These included paintings, sculptures, and decorative arts, many of which became prized possessions of the crown. Furthermore, Pompadour left an indelible mark on fashion. Her personal wardrobe, with its exquisite fabrics and designs, set trends that were emulated by the elite. In fact, her name became synonymous with the finest fashion, such that even her hairdresser profited from selling elaborate hairstyles inspired by Pompadour's own. While her influence on art, fashion, and the cultural landscape was undeniable, her role in politics was equally significant. Although she never held an official political office, her proximity to the king gave her considerable sway over royal decisions. For instance, she was known to advise the king on the choice of ministers, notably supporting the appointment of his finance minister, a decision that had far-reaching consequences for France's economic and political trajectory. Additionally, she played a crucial role in shaping the king's tastes, encouraging his patronage of certain artists and intellectuals. Her personal library, a gift from the king, containing over 20,000 volumes, was a testament to her intellectual pursuits and the esteem in which she was held. But perhaps her most enduring contribution to politics was the establishment of the independent Kingdom of Poland, with her lover at its helm. When the ailing Louis XV needed an heir, he turned to his mistress for help. Pompadour facilitated the union between her father's nephew and the Polish princess, resulting in a child who would become the future Louis XVI. However, despite her significant contributions and the respect she commanded, Pompadour was not without her detractors. There were those who questioned her legitimacy, who doubted her intellect, and who criticized her influence over the king. The birth of her son, too, was a source of contention, with some seeing it as a threat to the legitimacy of the royal line. As such, Pompadour lived a life of both privilege and scrutiny, always aware that her status was tenuous and that her actions were under constant observation. Despite this, she navigated the treacherous waters of the French court with aplomb, maintaining her position and influence until her untimely death in 1764. Her passing was a somber affair, with the Sun King himself remarking softly, "I will never again find a friend like her." And indeed, there was no one else quite like her. Pompadour's life, though controversial, was a remarkable journey from humble beginnings to the pinnacle of power. Her story is a testament to the complexities of the human experience, a blend of ambition, love, loss, resilience, and tragedy. She was a woman ahead of her time, a mistress who redefined her role, an intellectual who challenged norms, a patron who shaped cultural landscapes, and a politician who influenced the course of history. Her life was a paradox, a contradiction, a tapestry woven with the threads of societal expectations and individual aspirations. In the end, her story is a reminder that history's most fascinating figures are often more than the sum of their circumstances, that they are individuals whose lives, though seemingly confined by the boundaries set by society, ultimately transcend those limitations. There's this idea that Versailles was this place of strict etiquette, of endless watching where people had to perform for the king and for each other at all times. And of course that was true. But there's another side to this story. See, Versailles was also a place of secrets. Hidden passageways, secret rooms, whispered conversations behind closed doors. There was another Versailles existing right alongside the grand halls and manicured gardens, a Versailles of shadows and whispers. This was a place of furtive meetings and stolen moments, a world away from the gilded drawing rooms and ceremonial dining halls. It was a Versailles of concealment, of privacy, of stolen moments and secrets kept. So join me today as we look beyond the palace walls and explore the secret Versailles. The Sun King's palace was a labyrinth of over 400 rooms and 69 staircases. As the palace quiets again, we descend not into cellars, but into silence. For Versailles was more than just marble and gold leaf. It was a stage. Every room, every hall, every stairwell was a set piece in an endless play. Every courtier knew their entrance and exit, their words and gestures carefully rehearsed. Louis XIV wanted no rivals in this performance. He was the sun, the center of the universe. And he made sure that everyone knew their place in his grand design. Of course, we know about the Hall of Mirrors, the Royal Dining Room, the Opera House. These were the spaces that made Versailles famous, that dazzled visitors and intimidated rivals. But step away from these public spaces, and something else emerges, a different rhythm, a different purpose. The palace wasn't just for show, it was also a place of work, of intrigue, of everyday life. It was here in these hidden corners that the real Versailles unfolded. Like a tapestry, it was layered and complex. Behind the scenes, the palace had its own secret map, a maze of narrow corridors, false panels, and secret staircases known only to a few. As you wander through these secret passages, you can almost hear the whispers of history echoing around you. You might catch a glimpse of a face in a dusty mirror, half hidden behind a tapestry, or feel the brush of a ghostly hand on your arm as you pass through a doorway. It's a chilling reminder that you're not just exploring empty rooms. You're stepping into a world that once throbbed with life, where the powerful and the powerless alike scurried through these shadows. Some seeking solace, others trying to make their voices heard. Some plotting in the dark, others simply trying to survive. In the heart of the bustling palace, hidden away from the prying eyes of the nobility, lay the apartments of Madame de Montespan. Here, shielded by secret passages and discreet servants, she raised her illegitimate children. The fruits of her passionate affair with the Sun King, her world was a blend of opulence and secrecy. Much like the palace itself, while the rest of Versailles slept, she held whispered audiences, receiving nobles who came bearing gifts and favors. Now the ticking clock of the royal bedroom measured her dwindling time. Each night, she played a dangerous game, slipping through secret passages to avoid detection. A sudden noise echoed through the silent palace, breaking the spell. Startled, I turned to find a small hole in the wall, barely big enough for a person to fit through. Curiosity piqued. I pushed through the opening, finding myself in a narrow passageway. The air was thick with dust, the smell of mildew clinging to my clothes like a shroud. It was pitch black, the only sound my ragged breathing. I felt my way along the cold stone walls, searching for a way out. Just when panic threatened to consume me, I found it, a glimmer of light at the end of the tunnel. Pushing through the darkness, I emerged, blinking into a small, dusty room. But it was the sight on the far wall that stole my breath away. Set in a niche was a mirror, its ornate frame a whisper of Versailles' former glory. But it wasn't the mirror that held my gaze, it was what lay behind it. With trembling hands, I pulled on the tapestry, revealing not a wall, but a dark opening. Taking a deep breath, I stepped inside. The space was cramped and narrow, the air stale and heavy. I realized with a jolt that I was standing in a tunnel, the floor beneath me no more than a few loose stones. I hesitated, fear gnawing at my resolve. But the lure of the unknown was too strong to resist. With a deep breath, I descended. The tunnel was long and treacherous, the darkness broken only by shafts of dim sunlight filtering through cracks above. The air grew colder, damper, carrying the scent of earth and decay. Then suddenly, the tunnel opened up into a vast cavern. Gasping, I stumbled inside. Before me lay a subterranean labyrinth, the floors slick with moisture, the air thick with the scent of ages past. I wandered through the cavern, my footsteps echoing eerily in the vast space. I felt a sudden, inexplicable sadness, as though the spirits of those who'd come before me lingered here. Then I saw it, a glint of gold in the distance. Drawn to it, I walked towards it, my heart pounding. As I approached, I realized it was a door, its surface tarnished and weathered by time. Slowly, I pushed it open. On the other side lay a garden, a small patch of green nestled amidst the gray expanse. Flowers bloomed bravely, their colors vibrant against the gray backdrop. In the center stood a fountain, its water sparkling in the sunlight. I stepped out of the cavern, the cool air washing over me. As I looked back, I saw not just a door, but a portal to another world, a world of secrets and shadows. I stood for a long moment, lost in thought. Then, taking a deep breath, I turned and walked away, leaving the secret garden to its slumber. Versailles was a palace of contrasts, where grandeur met grime, splendor hid secrets. Amidst the gilded rooms and manicured gardens, there existed a Versailles of shadows, a hidden palace where whispers echoed and secrets thrived. It was a world away from the polished marble and vaulted ceilings, a place where power and passion collided, and where the past still lingers, waiting to be discovered. If these hidden corners could speak, they would tell tales of love and intrigue, of betrayal and despair, of laughter and tears. They would weave a tapestry of human experience, as rich and complex as the palace itself. And while we may never know what secrets lie buried within these walls, we can still feel their presence, the echoes of 1,000 stories waiting to be heard. For Versailles was more than just a palace. It was a stage on which life played out, a gallery of human emotions. And it's in the hidden corners, the secret passageways, and the forgotten rooms that we find the truest measure of its glory. These places are more than just relics of a bygone era. They're windows into the soul of a nation, a testament to the enduring spirit of humanity. They remind us that behind every grand facade, there's a story waiting to be told. And they invite us to listen closely, for in the silence of these forgotten rooms, we might just hear the whispers of our own history. In the vast halls of Versailles, one could easily get lost, not just in the labyrinth of rooms, but in the labyrinth of lives lived within those walls. For Versailles was a microcosm of the world, containing within its boundaries everything from the highest aspirations to the darkest secrets. Those who wandered its endless corridors were not just visitors, they became part of its story, their joys and sorrows mingling with the ghosts of past inhabitants. And so as you explore the hidden Versailles, remember that you're not just a tourist. You're a time traveler, a witness to history. The Sun King's palace was not just a monument to power, but a stage for life itself. And as you walk through its secret passageways, let the whispers of the past guide you, for in their echoes you'll find the true meaning of Versailles. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey through the hidden Versailles. I hope you enjoyed this adventure through the secret passages and forgotten chambers of the Sun King's palace. If you did, please don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more historical tales. Till next time, keep exploring the hidden corners of history. Who knows what secrets you might uncover? I have always loved history. I've been lucky enough to teach it, to write about it, and now to make videos about it. But I love learning from other people. That's why I started taking courses on brilliant.org. I want to learn more about math, science, and computer science. I'm especially interested in artificial intelligence right now because you can see how it can help with my work as a historian. Take their course, Demystifying Artificial Intelligence. For example, it teaches me all about deep learning algorithms, which are used everywhere today. From self-driving cars to facial recognition software, Brilliant breaks down these complicated topics into bite-sized lessons that fit into a busy schedule. And their interactive questions help me understand things that I never grasped before. They also offer thousands of lessons on other topics like math, physics, and computer science. And they're adding new ones each month. In the royal apartments above the palace at Versailles, time itself seemed to slow down. A man stirred. Sunlight slanted through curtains, illuminating dust motes dancing in the quiet air. The royal canopy bed rumbled slightly, a tremor that resonated through the vast chamber, announcing the imminent awakening of the Sun King. Beside the bed, a manservant stood poised, his hand hovering over the velvet curtains that concealed the face of the clock. Another waited with a silver ewer, ready to pour water from its depths into an ornately carved basin. A third stood patiently, holding a crimson cloth for any ablutions the king might require. All eyes were trained on the slumbering figure beneath the covers. For in this gilded cage of luxury, every minute was accounted for, every action anticipated. And soon, like clockwork, King Louis XIV would rise to greet the dawn, marking the beginning of another meticulously choreographed day in the life of a monarch whose every move was a performance. As Louis slowly awoke, stirring from his slumber, the first notes of the lever, the ceremonial waking, echoed through the royal apartments. This was no ordinary awakening. It was the commencement of another day in the sun, a day that would revolve around the king as its very center. Dozens of courtiers had gathered in the royal chamber, each holding a symbolic offering, a robe, a handkerchief, a shoe, anything that could catch the king's eye and win his favor. As the music swelled, they moved forward in a carefully orchestrated procession, a ballet of loyalty and ambition. One by one, they approached the king's bedside, presenting their gifts with exaggerated bows and gestures, vying for a single fleeting moment of the king's attention. The air buzzed with anticipation, a mixture of deference and envy. Louis, still groggy with sleep, sat up, blinking away the remnants of his dreams. The scene before him was one of sycophancy and intrigue, a panorama of faces, each eager to please, each hoping to be the one chosen by the king. It wasn't a comfortable start to the day, but it was a necessary one. For Louis XIV, waking was more than a transition from slumber to consciousness. It was a theatrical entrance onto the stage of the court, and those who played their parts well would be rewarded with the king's favor. Those who failed to do so might find themselves cast out into the shadows, their usefulness to the crown abruptly curtailed. The king's valet, a man named de Gembres, stepped forward, proffering a blue velvet robe trimmed with gold. It was a symbol of the king's color, of his majesty, and it was meant to be a mark of honor for whoever was granted the privilege of dressing him. Louis wrapped himself in the robe, the heavy fabric a comforting weight on his shoulders. He knew the importance of the ceremony, the significance it held in the intricate hierarchy of the court. It was a reminder of his place, not just as a king, but as a sun around which the courtiers orbited, each seeking their own share of the warmth and light he radiated. But Louis was not one to linger in the shadows of his own making. With the robe secured around his waist, he turned to face the waiting courtiers, his eyes sharp and alert, ready to assess their performance. One by one, they presented their offerings, their voices echoing through the vast chamber, their words carefully measured, their demeanor impeccable. There were shoes, each more splendid than the last, stockings, handkerchiefs, belts, every item designed to enhance the king's appearance and signal the devotion of the courtier offering it. The room was a cacophony of sound and color, a swirling vortex of loyalty and ambition, and Louis, the master puppeteer, watched with amusement, occasionally offering a nod or a smile to reward a particularly deft performance. Finally, only one remained, a young man named Fivard, holding a lace cravat. He stepped forward, his heart pounding in his chest, his hands trembling slightly. This was his chance to shine, to ingratiate himself with the king, and secure his future at court. As he approached the throne, he could feel the weight of all eyes upon him, the hopes and expectations pressing down like a physical burden. With a deep breath, he presented the cravat, his voice ringing out clear and strong. "Is your Majesty's cravat," he proclaimed, meeting the king's gaze directly. "May it please you." The room was silent, every head turned towards the king, waiting for his reaction. Louis, ever the pragmatist, broke into a smile. "Well done," he said, his voice warm and appreciative.
Oh.
"Your service is noted." The smile widened, transforming the king's face into a radiant sun. The cravat was perfect. Fivard had succeeded where many others had failed. He had caught the king's eye and earned his praise. For a brief moment, he basked in the glow of his triumph, knowing that his future at court was now secure. Yet as quickly as the praise had come, it was gone, replaced by the sober reality of life at Versailles. With the final touches to his attire complete, Louis XIV stood to face the full-length mirror on the wall behind him. His image stared back, resplendent in blue velvet and lace, a living embodiment of the French monarchy. But the king was not merely admiring his appearance. He was preparing himself for the day ahead, a day that would be filled with duties, decisions, and the ever-present scrutiny of the court. For Louis XIV, dressing was more than a personal ritual. It was a public declaration, a statement of power and authority. It was a performance as much for his own benefit as for that of his courtiers. As he adjusted his garments, his movements were precise, economical, betraying years of discipline and a keen awareness of his own image. Each fold, each pleat, was in its rightful place, a testament to the hours spent ensuring the king's wardrobe was not just opulent, but immaculate. With his clothing to his satisfaction, Louis turned from the mirror, his gaze sweeping over the courtiers assembled in the room. Their eyes were upon him, their expressions a mixture of admiration, envy, and deference. He acknowledged them with a curt nod, a silent acknowledgement of their presence, a reminder that he was their son, and they were but planets in his celestial court. It was time to begin the endless round of duties and decorum that made up a day in the life of the Sun King. As the morning wore on, Louis XIV moved through the labyrinthine halls of Versailles, stately figurehead amidst a sea of bowing courtiers and eager ministers. Time was a river here, flowing steadily towards the inevitable sea of night. The king was its current, guiding it along his path. Each chamber he entered, each hall he traversed was a stage, and the players within it, a cast of thousands, all performing their roles with unwavering precision. He received ambassadors from distant lands, their gifts piled high, their words carefully measured. He inspected military reports, his brow furrowing in concentration, his fingers steepled beneath his chin. He strolled through the manicured gardens, pausing to admire the sculpted hedges or the riotous blooms, a serene smile gracing his lips. All the while, unseen eyes followed his every move, recording every gesture, every word. And then, just as abruptly as it began, the day was turned towards its end. The sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the palace grounds. The air grew cooler, the light softer, and Versailles prepared for the evening ritual known as the coucher, the king's bedtime. Once again, the royal apartments were filled with courtiers, this time bearing not gifts but offerings of comfort and security. Candelabras flickered, casting dancing shadows on the walls as Louis, weary from a day of duties, prepared for rest. This too was a performance, a final bow in the play of the day. The king sank into a gilded chair, allowing attendants to remove his heavy garments, layer by layer, each action precise, each movement laden with meaning. As the royal valet took the king's sword, Louis watched, a faint smile playing on his lips. The sword, a symbol of his power, was placed on a nearby table, momentarily abandoned. In its resting place, it glinted softly in the lamplight, a promise of renewed vigor come the morning. Finally, Louis sank into the great four-poster bed, its curtains drawn for privacy. The familiar surroundings offered a rare moment of solace, a retreat from the ceaseless demands of the court. Here, in the quiet intimacy of his bedroom, the king was simply Louis, or so he would have you believe. For even in slumber, the Sun King was surrounded by courtiers, their whispers echoing softly in the dimly lit room. Sleep, after all, was only a brief respite, a pause in the eternal performance. For tomorrow the sun would rise again, bathing Versailles in gold and calling the king to his endless duties. And so the cycle would continue, day after day, year after year, until the final curtain fell. So what did you think? Did you enjoy this story? We'll see you next time. Versailles was never truly quiet. Beneath the music, beneath the pageantry, beneath the scent of orange blossoms and candle wax, there was always motion, always tension, always the hum of lives lived on display. Tonight you have walked these hidden halls. You have dressed the powerful, shared their secrets, wandered their shadows, and witnessed their rituals. And now, let your thoughts rest. Let the whisper of silk and the murmur of distant fountains fade. For the world of Versailles, with all its spectacle, is behind you now. Sleep well. Welcome, you're here to rest. To sink gently into a quieter rhythm, one not your own, yet strangely familiar. As you settle in, imagine the long sweep of ancient China. Centuries unfold like a scroll, inked with stories of hardship and triumph, silence and ceremony. Beneath vast skies and along mountain spines, people lived out their days under dynasties and emperors, gods and ancestors. Their world moved slowly, and tonight, so will ours. Close your eyes, or let your mind soften, as we walk slowly through four corners of that world. First among the laborers toiling under the sun and snow along the Great Wall, then into the mind of an emperor who wanted to live forever. Later, we'll descend into a quiet tomb of thousands, and finally, drift through scented courtyards where silence often said more than words. Let's begin. 2,000 years ago, the Emperor of China built a wall around his world. He built a world that would last forever. Not for you, it's for him. You died before you reached the end, but he lived on in stories and in stone. His name was Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of United China, and he had a problem. Thieves, raiders, and nomadic horse lords from the distant north were always at his border, stealing his riches and murdering his people. So he did what any reasonable leader would do. He hired someone to build a wall so big and so tall that no army could climb it. But the wall was just the start. See, emperors before him had tried to seal their borders with high walls, but they all failed. Their walls crumbled after a few decades, not even outliving their emperors. But Qin Shi Huang wanted something that would last longer than him, something only he could build. Wall made of the living, made of you. See, the emperor decided that the wall would be built by hands, 180,000 sets of hands to be exact. And those hands would be tied to the wall for life. Once a peasant, always a peasant. That was how it was. It began with a census. Every district in the empire sent able-bodied men to build the wall. Some were commoners, conscripted for a few months of backbreaking labor. Others were criminals, serving out their sentence one rock at a time. Still, others were entire clans, punished for the crime of existing along the wrong stretch of border. Families packed up, said goodbye, and walked towards the wall. Many didn't make it. Bandits and wild animals claimed most of the rest. And those who did arrive, well, they became the wall. You hauled rocks up steep slopes, tamped down layers of earth between wooden frames, carried soil up high ridges, and dug out foundations with picks and shovels. Your hands were raw, your feet cracked from walking miles in hemp sandals. You marched to the rhythm of hammers, the clang of metal on stone. You breathed in dust, the grit of it scratching at your throat. You ate when you could, a bit of millet gruel in the morning if you were lucky, sometimes a turnip.
Oh.
You drank water, cold and metallic, drawn from shallow wells. Each night you slept in makeshift camps or caves dug into the hillsides. There was little warmth beyond shared body heat and faint embers, quickly extinguished to avoid detection by bandits. When the sun rose, the work began again. Endless, thankless, back-breaking work. You walked beside men from other districts, men who spoke different dialects and worshipped different gods. Beside men who were once scholars and merchants, farmers and artisans, noblemen and beggars, here you were nothing but a number, another mouth to feed, another body breaking under the sun. Illness spread fast. Coughs turned into silence. The strong grew weak, and the weak simply stopped working. Those who fell were buried beneath the wall itself. Perhaps one day someone will find them. You kept your head down. You didn't want to meet the guards, not unless you had to. They didn't speak unless they must. Sometimes there were beatings, sometimes disappearances. You don't remember how long you worked on the wall. Time blurred into the gray backdrop of the sky, of the stones, of the dirt. You don't remember much at all. You only remember that you were leaving the wall, leaving the cold, hungry ghosts behind, leaving the ghost of the emperor who wanted a world that would last forever. You stumbled onto a road. A cart driver offered you passage for a few copper coins. You paid him with the last of your money, the last of your dignity, the last of your hope. You left the wall behind and walked toward your village. But when you got there, you didn't recognize it. The wall had consumed your fields, your home, your life. You wandered into the wilderness, a hollow shell of a man. You lived, but you were already dead. The emperor's wall had swallowed you whole and spat you out. Thousands of years later, tourists will walk where you once stumbled. They will see only the wall, the perfect wall, the eternal wall. They will never see the hundreds of thousands of faces it took to build it, to keep it whole. They will never know that you died before you reached the end, that the emperor never saw the completion of his dream. They won't know that he died believing the wall to be impenetrable, believing it to be eternal, believing it to be the world. This is the Terracotta Army, one of the greatest archaeological finds of all time. It is also one of the biggest tourist attractions in China. More than 8,000 soldiers stand guard at the tomb of the first emperor of China. Well, actually, there are only about 7,600 of these life-sized warriors. They're missing an arm here, a head there. Some are missing whole legs. But once this was the largest collection of ceramic soldiers ever assembled, 8,000 strong and growing. Archaeologists found them in 3 pits, dug into the side of the Emperor's Hill. Each warrior is unique. Their features are different, their clothes are different, so are their hairstyles. They even have different weapons. In fact, the details are so precise, the expressions on their faces so lifelike, it feels as if they could step right out of their pits and march across the field of battle. What makes them truly remarkable, though, is that they were made more than 2,000 years ago, and they're still standing. Well, sitting actually, because while we think of them as terracotta warriors today, they weren't fired like pottery. Instead, they're actually made of terracotta, a mix of clay and burnt lime. These warriors are incredibly hard. No wonder they survived. The first thing I want to show you today is the latest discovery related to the Terracotta Army, some very recent research coming from Chinese archaeologists. In May of 2022, state media reported that archaeologists had discovered an array of chariots and horses south of the main burial pit. At least 520 pieces of pottery were found, along with 130 arrowheads and over 2,000 pieces of wood. Some of the horses have been pieced together, and they look just as impressive as the soldiers. The problem is that many of them are broken. The reason why? Time. For more than 2,000 years, the horses and other objects have been exposed to air. They have eroded and weathered. So they've fallen apart. Can't see their exquisite craftsmanship, their features. All we see is that they're made of clay. But that's where our story today begins, because these fragments can tell us something very important about how the Terracotta Army was built. In the 1970s, when these warriors were first unearthed, everyone was amazed. How could they be so well preserved? How could they be so detailed? This was before we understood that these warriors were actually made of terracotta, that they were not fired. Today we know that there was a sophisticated production system behind this tomb. There was a training center where workers learned the skills they needed to make these figures. There were workshops where the hands were assembled, where heads were attached, where details were added. It took a few months to make each soldier. The horses were made the same way. And I think that's why these works of art are so special, because they were made by hand, piece by piece. Nobody cast them. Nobody mass-produced them. Every brushstroke, every delicate curve was done by hand. Even the cracks in their armor were drawn on, as were the wrinkles on their faces, the veins on their forearms. The level of detail is shocking. Means that there was a lot of time and care taken with every single figure. That was true of the army as a whole. Everything was made to last. The question is, how did they do it? We don't know everything about the techniques used to build the terracotta army. In fact, many of the secrets have been lost to history. But we do know some things. When a pit was dug, the walls were reinforced with wooden stakes. A layer of tamped earth was laid down. Then came the steel frame that held up the horses and soldiers. This was covered with a mixture of clay and burnt lime, which hardened over time into terracotta. Then began the process of smoothing out the surface, of adding details, of coloring the figures. The whole process was complex, but it was possible, and the results were spectacular. But what we know isn't enough. We still have so many questions about how exactly this happened. What tools were used? What methods were employed? What types of materials were available? We have some clues, but we need to find more evidence. And that's where the study of these broken clay horses comes in. This particular research project was based on a small group of these horses. It included 1 war horse and 2 horses from the emperor's carriage. These were badly damaged, which gave the researchers a good excuse to bring in X-ray machines. They scanned the fragments in order to learn more about the manufacturing process. In other words, they wanted to better understand the technology used to make these sculptures. Now I'm going to quote directly from the lead researcher. The discovery of the manufacturing technology of the horses will help us better understand the construction techniques of the terracotta army, providing valuable information for the protection and repair of the cultural relics. Okay, let me translate that for you. The idea is that if we understand how these horses were made, we can better restore them. If we know what techniques were used to assemble these figures, we can use the same techniques to put them back together. And if we can do that, then maybe someday soon, we can see what these horses looked like before they broke. Maybe someday soon, we can take these fragments and rebuild them piece by piece. But there's more to the story. The first emperor wasn't really interested in restoring broken things. He was interested in immortality. I mentioned that earlier. He wanted to live forever. To that end, he searched for elixirs, potions that would allow him to conquer death itself. The emperor drank mercury, we think, because it was believed to be a powerful medicine. But instead he poisoned himself. He died of cancer around the year 200 BCE, somewhere on a tour of his empire. He was only 49 or 50 years old. That's pretty young. But he accomplished a great deal in his short life. He defeated rivals and brought China together. He established a centralized government, standardized weights and measures, made a new legal code. But his greatest legacy is his tomb. It's one of the largest burial chambers ever built. It lies beneath the Emperor's Hill, and we haven't even explored it yet. We know a lot about the mound itself. It's 115 meters high and covers 16 acres. The entire hill is a tomb. At its core is a large brick chamber where the emperor's body was buried. It contains 2 underground palaces connected by a central corridor. One palace was for the emperor, the other was for his wife. Together, they covered more than 5,000 square feet. But the emperor didn't want to be alone. He ordered thousands of terracotta soldiers to accompany him into the afterlife. These were placed around his tomb. Between the soldiers and the various palaces is a huge network of tunnels. It's roughly 4,000 miles long. It's a maze beneath the earth. Only a few sections are open to the public, but much of it remains unexplored. What we see above ground gives us a good idea of what's below. The emperor's tomb is full of wonders, including these bronze chariots. You may have seen them on display at the British Museum. They were looted from the emperor's tomb during the early 20th century, so were many other artifacts. The site was pillaged in the years before excavations began. But what remains is still very impressive. The chariots are among the oldest examples of bronze casting in China. They're incredibly detailed. They have 4 wheels and elaborate decorations. They include parts of harnesses and traces that held the horses. The museum thinks they might have been ceremonial vehicles. That would make sense. You wouldn't need 4,000 miles of tunnels if you're burying an army. I mean, you wouldn't need that much space if you're planning on fighting battles in the afterlife. You'd need room for rituals. You'd need a place to store treasures. So I think it's safe to say that the Emperor's tomb was probably designed for more than combat. It was designed to give the first emperor everything he might need in the next world. He was obsessed with immortality, remember, and he had good reason to be. Immortality was one of the pillars of Chinese culture. The idea goes back thousands of years. It was based on traditional beliefs about the afterlife, but it was also based on practical concerns. The first emperors worried about dying. They wanted to pass on their power to their sons, so they wanted to live as long as possible. By the 2nd century BCE, emperors were living to be 60 or 70. But that wasn't enough. The first emperor was eager to live for eternity. Perhaps that's why his tomb is still so mysterious. It's filled with treasures, but it hasn't been fully uncovered. There are still places we've never seen, things we don't know about. That's because there's too much left to explore, too much to excavate. So for now, we'll have to make do with the bits and pieces that have already been found. A warrior here, a chariot there, a shard of a beautiful horse. Maybe someday soon we'll be able to piece them all together, literally. But until then, we'll have to settle for the stories they tell us about the man who built them. If you enjoyed this episode, I'd like you to click the link above to subscribe to my podcast. On it, we talk about all sorts of topics related to ancient China. We've talked about Confucius and Laozi. We've talked about ancient Chinese philosophy. We've even talked about how the Chinese invented gunpowder. It's all there for you to listen to. And if you subscribe today, you can listen right away. We've just left the haunting silence of the Terracotta Army, and if you watched our previous episode, you'll know we're on our way to see the Mountain River Han Dynasty tombs. As we drive, I want to talk about today's sponsor, Masterworks. It's no secret the ultra-rich have long used art as a way to grow their wealth. But thanks to Masterworks, everyday investors like you and me can do the same. From 1995 to 2021, contemporary art prices outpaced the S&P 500 by 164%. So you get the idea. When you invest with Masterworks, they handle everything: authentication, valuation, logistics. You don't need to be a connoisseur or have millions of dollars lying around. All you need to do is back a sale. They sell, and you cash out your share of the profits. With Masterworks, I've already backed sales of 3 iconic works by Banksy, Picasso, and Monet. The best part? You can start investing with as little as $100. Before we reach our destination, I want to explain why this place is so significant. During the Han Dynasty, it was common for emperors to build lavish tombs filled with riches and treasures. But there was a problem. When the Han Dynasty fell, these tombs were pillaged. Most of the emperor's treasures dispersed across the globe. For many years, historians assumed the same had happened here. But that changed in the 1960s, when a well was dug nearby, and a life-size terracotta warrior was unearthed. This was followed by the discovery of hundreds more, each one meticulously crafted, each one unique. Then came the announcement that stunned the world. Beneath the emperor's tomb, archaeologists believe there may be an entire underground city. In this week's video, we're going to find out if it's true. We're going to explore the underground city beneath the emperor's tomb and uncover the secrets it holds. Are you ready? Let's go. The discovery of the Terracotta Army led to the creation of a museum built right over the burial mound, shielding it from prying eyes and modern pollution. But it doesn't take long to realize the museum itself is a trove of treasures. I'm starting with my favorite, the bronze weapons. There are swords, spears, halberds, arrowheads, each one polished to a mirror shine. It's hard to imagine these weapons covered in dirt and grime just decades ago. Nearby, kilns are arranged like giant beehives. These were used to fire the army, each kiln capable of producing around 3,000 pieces a day. Such efficiency was vital. After all, no emperor wants his new terracotta army delivered cold. The museum also houses countless fragments of the colorful robes worn by the soldiers. There are delicate headdresses, helmets, even makeup, carefully preserved to help the warriors appear lifelike. And to complete the picture, there are detailed models of horses, chariots, all buried alongside the terracotta men. It's important to remember that these warriors were never intended to be discovered. They were buried with the emperor to serve him in the afterlife. And that brings us to the central question. Where is the emperor himself? Well, the answer is right outside. Hidden beneath this unremarkable mound, Liu Bang was interred more than 2,000 years ago. The first emperor of China wasn't just any ruler. He was an outlaw turned king who united warring states, declared himself emperor, standardized weights and measures, minted coins, and created a single script. Many of these innovations were written in stone at his tomb, so let's start there. These steely gazes seem to watch our every move as we walk among the rows upon rows of soldiers. The scale of what lies beneath us is almost impossible to comprehend. Did you know that experts estimate the original army numbered somewhere between 8,000 and 11,000 warriors? That's roughly the size of today's British army. It's incredible to think that the vast majority of these statues are still sitting in the ground waiting to be uncovered. Our journey through the Emperor's tomb begins with the army, but they were just the beginning. As we make our way further underground, we'll discover how skilled artisans and master craftsmen brought a whole city with them into the afterlife. Make sure to stick around until the end, because there's something incredibly dangerous lurking beneath the surface. We're now walking through the heart of the terracotta army. I'm surrounded by silent, stoic faces, each one bearing witness to the passage of more than 2 millennia. There are generals, scribes, acrobats, musicians. Some are relaxed, some tense, but none are smiling. Why? It's simple. Smiling could be seen as showing teeth, baring one's fangs. And that, in the context of a warrior, could invite misfortune. For centuries, grave robbers descended upon this site, stealing treasures and scattering the bones of the dead. Today, we are fortunate to witness these ancient figures in reasonably good condition. Although a few feet away, dozens of damaged heads sit in piles. Victims of looters or perhaps time itself. It's amazing to realize that despite the passage of so much time, we can still identify details like mustaches, eyebrows, scars. Each face is slightly different, suggesting that the soldiers aren't just mass-produced copies, but individuals with their own stories. They're a silent army, but their silence is golden. The level of detail is breathtaking. Some wear luxurious garments, others more practical attire. Some hold halberds, swords, bows, and arrows. The attention to detail is astounding. Even the folds of their clothing are painstakingly recreated. But what really captivates me is their uniformity. Each soldier perfectly aligned, marching together in eternal silence. It's awe-inspiring. At the end of the day, history shows us that armies can be brutal, ruthless, destructive, but this army is trapped in time, frozen forever. It seems strange to say it about such formidable figures, but they're strangely peaceful. It's as though their silence carries a message of its own, reminding us of the fleeting nature of power and the permanence of death. Maybe that's why I find them so fascinating. As we descend deeper and deeper into the labyrinth of tunnels, it becomes clear that the Emperor's tomb was far more complex than I'd imagined. We're now inside the tomb's main gallery. Looking down, we can see the neatly organized ranks of terracotta soldiers. But there's much more to this place than meets the eye. Tucked away in a corner are these chariots. They're not just ornamental, though. These chariots were designed to be functional, ready to carry the Emperor and his entourage to wherever they needed to go in the afterlife. If you look closely, you can even see small details like the whip holders. It's as if the charioteers are preparing for a journey that will never end. It's hard to overstate just how massive this place is. We're surrounded by rows and rows of figures, each one frozen in time. Up ahead, I can see the outlines of other chambers. We're going to visit them soon, but for now, I want to savor the stillness. There's something humbling about being in the presence of history on this scale. It feels like being at the edge of eternity. Our exploration of the underground city continues. Next up, we're stepping into the Emperor's stables. Just like the rest of the tomb, even the horses and chariots were given meticulous attention to detail. Each chariot is not just a vehicle, but a reflection of the opulence and power of the Han dynasty. Some are two-horse chariots, others are for horse affairs. And if you look closely, you can see details like the reins, the harnesses, even the traces. These are not just toys. They were meant to convey the Emperor's status even in death. It's a sobering thought that these figures, frozen in their eternal tasks, were once living, breathing creatures. Now they're silent companions to an emperor who's been dead for more than 2,000 years. The scale of the undertaking is almost beyond comprehension. Just think about it. Thousands of horses, all buried with their master. It's a testament to the wealth and power of the Han dynasty, but also a reminder of the impermanence of all things. Now I want to show you something truly remarkable, the museum's collection of bronze weapons. These aren't just relics of a bygone era. They're a testament to the skill and craftsmanship of the Han dynasty people. The quality is exceptional, the craftsmanship superb. These weapons weren't just tools, they were works of art. Look closely, and you can see the intricate designs, the masterful execution. These are not just swords or spears, they're legacies. Each one a silent testament to the artistry of a long-lost world. There's one last part of the tomb we haven't visited. It's right above us, hidden beneath the burial mound. According to historical records, the central chamber contains untold riches, rivers of mercury, a model of the world above, and deadly traps. Its experts believe it's the key to understanding the Emperor's beliefs about the afterlife, but it hasn't been opened. The reason is simple. Recent surveys detected high levels of mercury in the surrounding soil, indicating a toxic cloud within the tomb. Opening it could release this deadly vapor, poisoning all who enter. But there's another reason it remains sealed. It's a mystery, an enigma, a silent echo of the past. And sometimes, it's better to let sleeping giants lie. Now we're leaving the tomb and emerging into the sunlight. It's a moment of transition, moving from the darkness of the underground city into the brightness of the world above. As we do, I want to invite you to join us for our final series of the season. Over the past year, we've explored remarkable places, uncovering history, culture, and nature's wonders. Now we're asking you to be a part of our journey by voting for your favorite episodes. Your choices will determine which of our adventures will be crowned the most popular of the year. Thank you for joining us on this extraordinary journey through time. Till next time, keep exploring. The Forbidden City is not a place of noise. Even with thousands living inside its walls, it is a place of whispers. Imagine waking in a lacquered chamber, sunlight barely filtering through carved window screens. You are one of the Emperor's concubines, selected for your beauty, your grace, your silence. The morning is slow. Attendants bring hot water. You bathe, dress, sit for hours while your hair is arranged. The garments are elaborate, but you rarely leave your rooms. Meals are precise. Servants taste dishes before you do. Sometimes the Emperor visits, sometimes he does not. Jealousy is ever present. Alliances shift. A glance can become gossip. A gift can become a curse. You write poems, practice calligraphy, wait, seasons pass in painted gardens. You hear music in the distance, but you do not attend. Your world is a golden cage, its doors sealed by ritual and rank. Even at the height of favor, you are replaceable. Even in luxury, you are alone. And yet, the rhythm continues. The city moves in circles, each day much like the last. Now let us meet some of the women who lived out these countless days. First, the young ladies who have just entered the palace, their laughter echoing in the courtyards. Their arrival has been a whirlwind of activity. They have been assigned to various palaces within the sprawling complex. Each new girl dreams of being selected by the Emperor, practice their curtsies, learn the proper way to pour tea, all the while watching each other warily. One of them, Lady Li, is known for her wit. Another, Lady Zheng, for her beauty. And the youngest, Lady Hui, for her naivety. Will any of them win the Emperor's heart? In another part of the Forbidden City, away from the prying eyes of the young ladies' lives, a woman, who has seen many seasons come and go, whose steps are sure and silent as she moves through the palace corridors. She is the chief consort, the most senior of the Emperor's wives. Her son, the crown prince, is the Emperor's heir. Power flows through her veins. But beneath the silken gold, she is a woman scorned. She entered the palace as a young, vibrant girl, but years of court intrigue have taken their toll on her. She observes the young girls with a mixture of amusement and disdain. She knows their games, their hopes, their fears. She has been there too. Once. Then, there is the Emperor himself, the man whose favor they all crave. A figure of immense power and privilege, yet trapped in the gilded cage of his own making. He spends his days on ceremonial duties, meeting officials, receiving foreign ambassadors, all the while aware of the scrutiny of his vast empire. But it is in the quiet moments that he is most vulnerable, haunted by the ghosts of his past, the concubine who bore his first son, the chief consort who holds the court against him, the eunuch who whispers in his ear. He seeks solace in the company of young girls, their laughter echoing in the halls of his memory. But even their presence cannot drown out the whispers that follow him everywhere. For in the Forbidden City, even the Emperor is not above gossip. Each of these characters is a prisoner of the Forbidden City, trapped by the rules and rituals of the court. Their stories are a reminder that even in the greatest of palaces, the human heart yearns for freedom. Now, as we bring this journey to an end, We invite you to step out of the Forbidden City and into the comments below. What stories from history would you like to hear next? Which palaces and gardens around the world intrigue you the most? Share your thoughts and join the conversation. We have walked the cold ridges of the wall, stood in the presence of emperors, descended into hidden chambers, listened to quiet footsteps in marbled courtyards. History is not always loud. Sometimes it lingers, in silence, in repetition, in the texture of daily life. Now, as you return from these ancient rhythms, perhaps your own breath has slowed. The pace of the present feels distant. The past, curiously calming, and so we end. Not with fanfare, but with stillness. The Great Wall, the terracotta soldiers, the Forbidden City, all remain, as do you, as well.